My name is Varan Merton. I'm a author writing out of the American South. I am here to discuss philosophy and the meaning of God. Um, I take God to be a mythological figure, a literary character, and I think that concept has been necessarily adapted in more modern times in order to keep the idea alive. But I don't see it as a real thing. And that's my stance.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
and
here to talk about. But I'm also here to ask questions and learn a little bit more about the modern concept of God.
I'm Mike. I'm actually retired. I was an electrical contractor. Now I'm living in Belize for the past 2.5 years, and my background, I was a former atheist who became a Christian, and that happened later in life. So I'm coming up with a little bit different perspective, and I do believe in God. I believe God is a real thing, and I always approach. I'm not talking about a generic God. I'm talking about very much to tradition, the God of Abraham. I'm saying the God from that tradition is a real thing, and I hold a position you can counter that in life also. And I'm always looking to learn more from that, expound it, and I'm always here to challenge my beliefs and I just love these type of conversations. Even before I was a theist, always did. And so I guess I'll start off, but kind of here's what I kind of conceive God as. Like I said, I pretty much am tying into that tradition, and you know, but also I'm rejecting a little bit what I call kind of the classical God of theism. Where we assign these traits of omnipotence and omniscience to God. I just look at those more so. It's not God is not a being with immense power and knowledge, but when we bring in like omni traits, those aren't very clarifying. Those are concepts that we can't make much sense of, and I don't think they're very good descriptors to use. I think as soon as we start talking about concepts like that, we're left this image of God kind of like Morgan Freeman. And I'm sure if you've ever watched the Bruce Almighty or Evan Almighty movies, God walks in there, he's kind of like this guy amongst other guys. And I think that that is a useful tool for people to help engage God, but the minute you try to take that as a reality, things just kind of get weird and don't make sense. And so I don't like applying those kind of labels to the concept. I think if you're looking to what God is, you have to start with an historical foundation and build a description based off experiences. And as you're building that description, you're going to move beyond what you experience, but you can't I'm going to define God and try to make the reality fit this model I've sort of created that often doesn't work.
Um, One thing that still stood out to me from our conversation yesterday, we were talking about the three O's:
Yes,
omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. Um, And we both agreed that omnipotence, as soon as you try to apply it in any practical way, it collapses under its own weight
correct.
by very definition. But omniscience, I wonder, do you think it's possible that God could be omniscient in the way of the Laplace demon, and that he sees each and every possibility, but in that way being omniscient, he sees every possible outcome, every possible action, every possible eventuality, but doesn't know which one will occur until it does, thereby still allowing for free will. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think that's a possibility. The only problem I see with that is bring in infallibility. If you want to hold some infallibility, because it come down to like if I know all possible outcomes, okay, but then we bring into belief states. If God has a belief and goes, okay, I believe that Mike here is later on today at 5 o'clock is going to eat a pizza. Okay, can God be wrong? You get in this weird situation. Well, if God has this belief, can he be erred? Because at 5 o'clock, if I have free will, then I could eat something else because that future is undetermined. And so now you have this situation where you can say, well, God's not going to have beliefs, or then God could have a belief that could not come to pass and therefore be fallible. So that's another reason I don't like those traits, because now we get in this little puzzle about characteristic. Well, is that the way the world actually works? It's kind of beyond us to know that. But now we're having this concept. We're trying to say this concept of omniscience. And we can think of ways to save it, but even like a situation like that, well, how does that play out? I don't know the answer to that, really. It seems to me that God being infallible, if you're trying to hold on this conception of omnipotence, can be a problem. And so I just don't know how that works. I think that's not being helpful. Because now we're arguing about heads. I mean, angels are on a head of a pin, and not looking at God as what level we can actually comprehend.
Let's take a step back real quick and see, establish where we're getting any of these ideas from, like infallibility, omniscience, omnipotence. Is it fair to say that we're basing this on Scripture? And supposition taken from Scripture, but Scripture being the root.
I don't think, in a large part, Scripture is the root. It's really, if we look at it, like the early Hebrews, they weren't doing philosophy. They weren't, philosophers. Their writings aren't of that structure. I think a lot of times we get the terms of omnipotence is basically as the Christian faith started intersecting with basically the Greek culture. And so these were concepts that were developed in Greek philosophy. Omnipotence, omniscience, they had those in Greek philosophy. And I think historically you have a situation, you have these concepts out there, and you have this idea of this Christian God who's this most powerful being. And so, those traits must apply then. And if you don't, it's like if you have omnipotence, omniscience, it's sort of like if you don't look under the hood too much, they sound coherent when we say them. And so I think it's a situation where we think those applies. And so you have theologians like, Augustine who want to apply those to that and try to make them work. And they think they have a formulation that works, and that gets baked in the tradition. And that's where I think they come from. And because if you get in the biblical, like there is some support for it in the Bible. The most one you have is omnipotence, because you have this idea of God Almighty. So we open our Bibles up and we see God Almighty. It's like, okay, that seems to line up with this concept of omnipotence.
Sort of.
Until you look, it could.
Yeah, because you can be more mighty than everyone else you compare to, but that still falls short of being omnipotent. That's something that we were discussing yesterday, where I said, God could use that term, but not mean I literally can do anything. He just means I am in complete control. You can trust in me, and that being the point, but it was misconstrued by people who need, well, for instance, one of the main thrusts of Christianity is there is only one God, and he makes that rather clear, his own importance. But the question that I was asking is, are we basing what we know about God on the Scriptures? Like, what is our source? What is our source of knowledge for when we talk about, like when you say, well, omniscience can't work like the Laplace demon because God would lose his infallibility. Okay, well, where's infallibility coming from? Are you basing that on Scripture or Thomas Aquinas?
The infallibility is sort of baked in that concept of omniscience. Like it doesn't. The sort of a weird thing is like, and that's how you define omniscience. So some ways you can define it is like, well, all true propositions. If I know all true propositions, then I would have. Oh shit! I'm gonna upgrade my Zoom meeting. If God knows all true propositions, then you could say then, okay, God has all knowledge. But that allows for you to have false beliefs. Does that contradict omniscience?
I just want to know, where are we getting our knowledge of God from? Like, what is canon? Insofar as this discussion, what's canon knowledge and what's not?
I think you get, as a pure question, I think it comes from several things. You get it from Scripture, from experiences, and some just what people do, just theorizing what God can be. I mean, some of it just is people just theorizing what God can be. Like we're bringing our concepts and applying them to God. We're looking at it and say, well, God should be like this. This is the type of figure God should be. So some of it is, we're taking our concepts and saying we think God should have these. That's an example of us kind of that reaching that beyond, is we know we're sort of bringing some to it. And so what we're working with is sort of an amalgamation of
Doesn't that mean
things
you're
I've been
making it
through
up?
inspiration.
Or I should say, what is
I
the
would,
difference between that and making it up? That's a better question.
honestly, a fine line. I mean, is there some, our concept, some that's a social construction elements in there? Absolutely, there are. I mean, there are things that we've brought to this concept, and that I look at that as, we're always going to bring some of our concepts to any situations. You can't really avoid that. And so some of that is us doing that, is we're bringing some concepts to God. I mean, that does occur. That is mixed in there. And filtering those out, well, that's difficult. And you're never going to be complete. Filtering out what you're bringing to the concept versus what you're getting from it, there's always going to be a little bit of interplay like that, and completely filtering them out there is difficult to do. And I don't think you'll get to a situation where you completely can. Every time we encounter something, I'm bringing something to that encounter. I can't filter myself out of the equation.
Okay, so how do I know when I'm talking about God then? Like, it just goes back to that original question. What is canon as far as the characteristics of God when you say God? I mean, you said that part of it is a social construct, but aren't those inspired by Scripture? Isn't Scripture the root?
It is. Scripture is the root. Scripture and Revelation's in the root. But, I don't know if your concept, with the idea of, but it's, and so we have a situation where we're getting it from the concepts, we're applying our understanding back. And it's sort of, you get this sort of little mix there. One philosopher, Sellers, he had a work he called it Myth of the Given. And part of like foundational philosophy was this theory that you could have these raw concepts that were sort of unfiltered, and those existed. And in traditional ideals of knowledge, like justified true beliefs, there's an idea there were certain base beliefs that were just self-evident, and you sort of base knowledge on that. But Sellers kind of looked into it and said, well, you don't really have that situation. There is no true given, but you can't have true unfiltered concepts. And so you have this weird little interplay. We have this base level where they're influencing us, but we're also influencing them. And so sort of getting that raw, unfiltered data, at a certain level, you can't quite get there. Because, to understand anything, there must be at least some context with it. And so you'll have an interplay where the data changes my concept, and so I have this new concept and apply it back to the data. And sort of, this idea that we can filter ourselves out, that's sort of the myth. That's what we're saying, the kind of myth of the given. We couldn't filter ourselves out there. So you can't ever say that I'm having true unfiltered data or true unfiltered access like that. You can't ever quite get to that point. And so I think you're going to have that with God some too. It's like we can't get to a point where we completely remove ourselves there. There's always going to be that risk of I'm not encountering God as it is, but I'm bringing something to that. And so that's always a difficulty. That's always a difficulty for the believer. Am I believing this because I say it's God, or am I bringing something to that? And for the believer, that's always a little bit of that struggle. You're always going to have that tension there.
So when we're building our social constructs surrounding the idea of God and they conflict with Scripture, who wins?
Well, look at Scripture is, again, because we have to sort of establish what Scripture is. I don't look at Scripture is not something that God wrote. It's not something that God penned and handed to us. At the end of the day, Scripture is men writing about their experiences with God. So there is a level of fallibility to there. Because one of the things, that anytime it's saying you're in a situation, believers, well, how do I deal with the Bible? Because without that revelation, I have no information of God. But at a certain point am I going to take that as, as some fundamentalists do, where this is literally God writing it down? Well, I think you can't take it that way. that there's enough clues within there that says you can't quite take it that way.
Wait,
And so what we're having,
let's focus on that because I didn't
yeah,
exactly hear what you said. There's too much what in it that you can't literally take it that way?
there's clues within the scripture,
Clues.
I think, that tell you that you can't, you're not meant to take it as the word for God, as the literal rendering of God. And sort of like here's how I kind of engage the Bible. Here's how I kind of basically engage the Bible is what's my starting position? I am a Christian. That is my fundamental statement. I accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And so now I got that. That's my starting information of engaging the Bible. So with that, I got to figure out kind of what's my keystone of doing with the Bible. And I kind of go to John. So if I'm looking at a Christian, I'm basing this off Jesus. What statements are going to work with? And so I kind of look at that as, sort of go to the beginning. And if in the Bible, you sort of have a creation story within John, when he says, the first three verses of John, like, in the beginning there was the Word. And so I look at that as, in the Greek, that's in the beginning there was logos. And we don't have a word in English that corresponds to logos. Logos does mean word, but also means reason, logic, and discourse. And also logos was a technical term in Stoic philosophy that was occurring at that point. Mm-hmm. And so you have schools there where you have this logos being this technical term with this inherent order in the world. And so I look at that's our starting point. God is logic. God makes sense. And so you can use reason as your God, as your guideline, because that is part of the nature of Jesus. That's kind of because with any language, you have to start with certain axioms. So you have logic, you have certain base axioms, that sort of establishes the parameters and uses of the language. And so Jesus is serving at that. So your logic is this being. That's starting the cornerstone, the axioms of the language you're going to use to engage. So it's kind of what I'm building. I'm starting out there. If I'm going to speak of God, it's sort of what language you're going to use. So what am I going to bring there to interpret there? And so I look at that. So God is this logic. And so I'm going to describe a reason behind everything Jesus does. And one of the things you look at what he didn't do, he didn't write anything down. And so, okay, so in essence, when I'm saying I'm a Christian, I'm saying the divine was on earth. I'm accepting that as the situation. So the divine was on earth. What did he do and didn't do? Well, he didn't write anything down. Mm-hmm. So I think that says something. But at the same token, he would be in a position where he knew that things would be written about him. Mm.
To you, what does that say?
It says that, as you look for meaning, you have to look at the form as part of it. If I'm looking to understand, I got to look at the form of his life. The logic is the life. So I got to look at the form of that, And so if you're not writing something down, he's not saying that's not important, because he refers to the traditions of written text of the Old Testament.
Who does?
He's saying, he refers to the Old Testament. He's saying you have this Mosaic law. It has meaning.
Wait, you said New Testament. You mean Jesus referred to the Old Testament?
So sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. He referred to the Old Testament.
I do remember
so
that.
He's referring to Mosaic law. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He says this Mosaic law has meaning and value, but part of his charge against the Pharisees is you're misinterpreting it. You're misapplying it.
But Jesus... I know Jesus referred back to the Old Testament, but did he ever refer specifically to the fall as and when he did he refer to the fall as a real event or more of a metaphorical?
I'm trying on those. I can't recall anything where he basically refers to literal. And that's part of the problem about Jesus. He talked about parables, and so he doesn't really refer much to anything in a literal sense. He did, part of his teaching, he's never referring to anything literal. He's always teaching in parables. He never laid out a doctrine. This is how it is. And it's one of those things I look at is that's where you have to look at the meaning of the form. Why not be specific? And part of the problem is it's why not be specific? He could have taught in a very Greek philosophical manner with Aristotle and Plato. Let me try to lay this out. There's no misunderstandings.
Right.
Why teach in parables? You have to look at that and say, There must be a reason for that.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's no such
Yeah.
thing as foolproof.
Yeah.
I think that teaching by example or by metaphor, allegory, however you want to slice it, it's teaching the abstract,
Exactly.
can have a greater weight that lasts longer. And I think that's um, well, for one thing, why it's popular. Um, but again, that's kind of supposition, but I think that there's something to that. Uh, what was I going to say? So, you were talking about logos. Would you consider God, Jehovah? Which I actually should start saying Jehovah because um, you made the distinction. You're not just talking about a vague concept of a God. You're talking specifically about the one from the Hebrew Bible, and then
Correct.
by extension, the Christian Bible. Correct?
Correct.
Would you say that he is the personification of logic? And I don't
I
mean
always
that
have one.
in a singular
It's
definition,
a
but would that description fit him? Is a better way of phrasing it.
I don't want to be hesitant. It's just like anytime you basically any statement that where you go to the absolute, I think you always got to be a little bit careful. Does say what God personifies logic? I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's a little bit different. Is he the personification of logic? I'm always hate when we try to pull a concept to like infinity in a way where you're trying to make it unbounded. I'm always a little bit hesitant on those because I think as soon as we do those, we're getting beyond our own understandings. Is God what I describe to God like? Is God logic? Well, God must operate in a logical manner. Absolutely, I would agree to that. When we say personifications, okay, let's be clear about what we're saying because we're taking this now to a very absolute statement, and let's make sure we're not outrunning our own understandings a little bit. And so
Is there
I
a
would
difference?
if God does, I must not much. Like I put it this way, God would not act in an unreasonable manner. Let's put it that way. Like sometimes we can look at our actions, and say, "I will do unreasonable things. I will do illogical things." I would say,
So,
no, God does not do that.
so the illogical things attributed to him must have been mistakes on behalf of the authors.
What were you referring to? What are you talking about? I'm not sure what's up.
About
You're
the no,
saying
how
the
about
lo-
the Noachian flood for one? Um,
the flood of
the
Noah.
yeah, the entrapment of the Garden of Eden. Assuming that's not metaphorical, you can't blame people for making the wrong choice when they don't know right from wrong. Not to mention the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, Eve was lied to. So, another thing. He's rather fond of punishing people and their descendants for things that aren't even crimes, such as being born out of wedlock, a bastard down to the 10th generation not being able to enter the kingdom. Things like that. I think those are three very good examples of illogical behavior, if not outright mean.
In those, I mean, and that's where engaging in the Bible becomes important. Like this is man writing about experiences,
Mhm.
and the reality of human existence is if I have a child out of wedlock, they're gonna carry that. That's not how much you know God as willfully imposing it. It's like that's an order that's going to have to come about. Because that's the one thing that if you're dealing with billions of people and interactions, you're dealing with imperfect humans through those two. And like society is going to apply that to you. If you have a child out of wedlock, that child is going to carry that. That's just a fact of reality. And you can't really have a reality without that being the case. I can't have people that have free will and have a situation where that doesn't occur. And so I don't look at it as God's opposing it. That's just the order of reality.
That's
And
how
to
it was
have
written.
reality,
It was written as a law, not as an observation. Um, Go
that
back
that
and look at the
is,
verse.
yeah,
It is written as
yeah.
a law, as a declaration. But once again, my real question was then are those illogical or cruel acts or edicts attributed to Jehovah, are they mistakes on the behalf of the author? or
I
authored?
would true that they're counted the same way. It's like we look at our laws of basically, natural laws. At the end of the day, like laws are actually descriptive. Like the laws of gravity, stuff like those. At the end of the day, those are descriptive laws. We're describing this feature that we say in reality. And I look at those being the same thing. Like that's a descriptive fact. Like that's going to occur.
Hmm.
I just look at that being a feature of reality, and it's not so much that you know at the end of the day, like all things are attributable to God because you're looking at this motif that God is creator. So at the end of the day, all things can be attributed to God. Where we get a mistake is thinking there could be a world a different way, and that's what I look at is and that's why I really push back against this Morgan Freeman version of God, because it renders everything too simplistic. If I'm going to have a reality, there's going to be trade-offs in that just for things of existing. As soon as I have multiple people, if I'm going to have a realm of multiple people and give them free will, they're going to make their judgments on those through those. And you have to allow that to happen. It's easy to say back like it should be better, but that better condition may not allow existence, if that makes sense.
The the words you used were coherent, but no, that does not make sense. There is no argument that the Bible could not have been much, 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 much more moral than it is. Now, if you account for the authors who put in whatever
Well,
they cared for and did ignored the just nature of God, okay, but that still makes
yeah.
God that much more invisible and look exactly like a non-existent entity. But putting that aside for a second, you mentioned about the infinite and how that makes it harder. Um, where are you getting infinite from? And what does that mean? First of all, how do you define God being infinite? Is that just a synonym for unknowable, or does he actually have an unlimited quality to him? And what is it?
Really, any infinite, you're basically saying it's an unbounded situation. And so, like, if if typically, like if you run in physics, when you find an infinity, that means you screwed up. You found something unbounded. That's why I look at it the same way. As soon as you make something unbounded, it escapes language. I mean, language, every act of language is an act of bounding. As soon as I try to say something unbounded, I'm operating outside of language and outside of thought. I look at that as soon as you say it's offended, everything breaks down. There is nothing that can be said about that
Nothing that can be
because
said
all
about what?
language, about infinite, because basically all thought, all language is bounding. As soon as you introduce a concept of being the unbounded, well, I can no longer say anything about that. That's how I'm looking at affinity. It's undefined.
Well,
An infinite is something that is undefined.
what is the difference between that and just making an excuse?
I don't. I don't look as making an excuse. Again, that's what I'm saying. Like we're bringing these concepts of infinity to God. We're bringing those into discussion,
Why?
and that's the. Why do we do that?
Yeah. Like, why does God need to be infinite?
I don't think that God necessarily does. I'm not looking at that. I'm not trying to describe this as power in that ways. I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's helpful to look at it that way because you can't make any
But
sense of it.
what I'm saying is before you were talking about God being unknowable and you described him as infinite. What I'm asking
Well,
is, what do you mean
I
by
don't
that?
want.
And
Well, listen,
how do you
I'm
know?
looking at like if let me be clear. Like I'm not going to describe look really want to look at God as infinite in those ways. Again, I'm looking at those. That's just not healthy. You can't round that. So I don't want to. If I said that I want to misspoke, I'm not trying to assign an affinity to God like that. I just don't. If that's the case, we can't even know about that. Those are scriptures that we just can't work with. And so, it's basically the limits of God's power is not something I can know. I don't know the limits of those. I'm never going to know those
Why?
because why can't we know those?
Why can't you specifically?
Why can I know those?
Yeah, why can you not know the limits of God?
Why can't I know the limits of God? I'm saying in some ways God is beyond me. I can't know. The same situation, like I can't, as far as physics, my understanding of those are limited. Anything you approach the end of it, it gets to limit what I'm capable of understanding.
So
Why
it has
cannot I do that?
so it has
I
to do
just
with
can't.
so it has to do with how complicated the nature of God is, or just because we haven't been told it, or like what is the barrier? Or are there more than one barrier?
The barrier is our ability to understand. I mean, that is the barrier. I mean, there is a limit to our understanding.
If I had never heard of Jehovah, or if I'd never even heard of the concept of deity, and we met online, and you say, I am a theist. I said, what's that? You said, well, I'm also a Christian. You say, what's that? What would you tell me?
If you had never encountered a deity,
Yeah, if I did not know what a deity was, how would you explain it to me? And how would you explain your religious worldview? Like you say you're a Christian. What does that mean?
here's the thing is I don't think I can speak to you because that's why. Here's several reasons. Like, because Paul Tillich, one theologian I like a lot, he talks about this is everything we say about God is symbolic. Our language is symbolic. And so the way I describe God is just a way for me to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything I say about God is not necessarily going to be true, because as soon as you have a concept of God, you're saying God is prior to language. But I have to have God is prior to language. God is
Prior to language.
pre-linguistic.
Okay.
It's pre-linguistic. And so if you have no concepts of deity, stuff like that, I don't have a way to communicate with you. I'm trying to understand the thrust of your question.
Yeah, but
I'm thinking if I
that's not
encounter
true, because
somebody who
you have to tell children. Children aren't born knowing who Jehovah is. And in
they're not
fact,
born,
Christianity,
but yeah.
actually, one of the tenets is to proselytize, to witness to others, to spread the word. So, how would you witness to me?
Let's take the case. Let's take the case of children. I think that's a good segue into this. To try to understand what I'm looking at as being the problem behind that. Because with children, they're immersed in a culture. So children start learning and picking up that culture. They learn a language. Because part of like learning a language is basically is us aligning perspectives. We're taking common experiences those and building upon those common experiences of those and craft examples. So with kids, all language, we're constantly giving examples. It's like if I go in there and I'm trying to teach a child what a game is we're going to have a shared life. And so I play peekaboo with my child. And there's no linguistic talk there. We're just engaging. And then as they acquire language, I try to teach them a concept of the game is I can start pointing to shared experiences. That's a game. When we were playing peekaboo, that's a game. When we were kicking that ball the other day, that's a game. And so I start just giving examples of game. And you'll get to a point where if you ask a child to define what's a game, well, they can't give you a definition. And so the question is, if I'm raising a child, how do I know when that child understands the concept of game? And you basically, our process to do that is, can they use that concept in a way that works within our language? If my kid's writing and I point to the pencil and I go, Tommy, is that game? If he says no, it's like, okay, you may understand. If I point to checkers and go, Tommy, is that a game? He says yes, I think he understands. If I point to the pen and I say, Tommy, is that a game? He says yes, I say no. A game is like when we were playing ball, when we were playing peekaboo, we were playing checkers. That's a game. Mm-hmm. And so we're relying on this group of shared experiences to build our language. And so like if we have no shared experiences, I can't really talk to you. That's why when you bring that question of a person that never heard anything, well, I'm going to have to start finding what shared experiences do we have. And so if we have no shared experiences, I can't really even speak to you. And that's why, in the examples, we sort of have to start what basis of shared experiences with you. And so like if I met a tribesman, if a hunter-gatherer, I could probably start talking to about the concept, because I have to look at what things are in common, what shared experience we have. And a virtue of us being human, we should have some, But I'm going to have to start building from those shared experiences to start introducing terms and languages in there. So that's why it's sort of difficult. That's why any talk of God, I look at any talk of God outside of a tradition, well, it's hard to talk about it because we don't have those shared experiences to build on. We're going to be working with a very limited perspective, but we got to have some place to start on. And so I've met a person that's never heard this deity concept. They're going to have to live with me, for lack of a better word, so we can start building a shared vocabulary, and then we can start that understanding, and then I can start explaining it.
You can also describe a game as a playful contest, and you can go from there. Do you think that Jehovah created or crafted the universe?
For me, I look at that as, and this may sound weird, in some ways, almost an uninteresting question. And here's why I sort of say that is, obviously we can't get back before time. And I don't think, and having this view is this God, this entity that stands outside time, I don't think that's right. And so I look at it as like the question of creation. I look at God as being an embedded feature of the universe. Is God the creator of it? At the end of the day, I don't know, but for me, I'm looking at that as an uninteresting question.
I think that's a very interesting concept you just introduced. Would you say that your
Yeah,
view is akin to or a type of pantheism?
I in some ways I will say I'll mention that sort of a yes and no because the problem I would say yes is because pantheism comes with some baggage. Partly because I look at this, is when I look at God is again what
What
we call
baggage?
Christianity.
What
Huh?
baggage? What baggage? You said baggage, right? What baggage does pantheism?
Because every time you use a term, there's a culture and a history and a context with that term.
Oh, I
There's a
know.
whole
It's
there's a
annoying.
history,
Trust me.
is all that, and so
But you know what I meant,
with
right? I'm
yeah
not about to try to
with Pan
box
with,
you into something.
yeah,
I'm using it as a
that's what I
descriptor.
know what you mean, and so I want to engage because you're talking about you're sort of saying you look at a facet of religion and sort of God sort of exists pre-religiously and beyond those. If you look at pantheism, as God is sort of exists beyond those and as this base level reality beyond the religious traditions, I would agree with that.
But you said
But
you do
obviously,
see God, first of all, as masculine. So he is, because I've been saying he and you've been saying he rather than it, and you have said the Abrahamic God, Jehovah, is
specific on that, God is not masculine, but same deal, like we have to speak in some way.
well,
And so the
no,
God, the Father
I wasn't done
motif,
though with my
yeah,
description.
sorry.
And
Yeah,
the
sorry.
masculine part is not the important part. I'm just
Yeah,
making sure that I'm not putting words in your mouth by continuously saying he as opposed to
yeah,
it. Um, because if you diminish his personality down enough, it's indistinguishable from just a force. And I don't think that's how
yes.
you view it. That's why I've been using a personal pronoun. Um, again, don't want to put words in your mouth. But what I'm saying is you
Yeah.
do see God as an inherent feature of the universe, correct?
Yes, and I'm going to say I'm feeling God is a being with intentionality and agency,
Okay, good.
and
That's another thing I was going to ask.
so I am going to fall on that line that is a feature,
Does God want things?
and that's where you get a little bit difficult things through there. When I say that is, I would say yes to that, but like, am I going to? It's very careful to say me to understand because like I'm encountering you. Like I can say you're as a being you're going to have wants, but it's very hard for me to say what you want.
Yeah, I'm not about to go there. I'm
Yeah,
piece
yeah,
by piece
but
trying to
yeah,
see what we can establish as features of Jehovah. So Jehovah, you said, is an inherent part of the universe, perhaps
yes,
not predating it, but is all pervasive, perhaps. Does have intentionality. You did say that. Does
correct,
have desires. I didn't say they were knowable. I'm not about to go there.
correct. I will go
But
with desires. I agree with
because
you.
of
Yes,
intentionality, he would logically have likes, dislikes, or desires, correct?
Correct. He would have desire. Yes.
Yes. Um, what is something else we could? Because this is something that we talked about yesterday, and I really wanted to get it on camera.
Mm.
How separate is God from other thinking beings?
And that's where here's on that. Let me, I don't want to preface this comment, because here's how I want to preface this, because I'm going to do a maneuver that people do all the time, but but like, are you familiar with Sean Carroll, the physicist Sean Carroll? He's very much a,
Who?
well, Sean Carroll.
Sean
He's
Carroll.
he's a theoretical physicist. If you've ever heard of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, he's a very big proponent of many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Okay.
And here's why I'm kind of bringing that up is you have he's a theoretical physicist, and so he'll support and say he believes in the many worlds interpretation. He obviously says he didn't have theoretical proof of that. It's like, as a physicist, he's looking at it as like, here's what I think it is. Mm-hmm. Where it's a theory that it's not proven yet. It's not the only option, but he's looking at it as like, I think it's the most likely case. And so what I'm about to say is I'm saying it in that kind of vein. I think this is the case. I think there's support for it, but I'm not in a position where I can say this is the absolute.
Yeah, fair enough.
I look at, because basically, the biggest question we talk about God, I feel those is, especially in today's culture of physicalism, is, okay, it's kind of like, show me the body of God. Like, okay, if God exists, where's the body? Mm-hmm. And so what I'm looking at is like, when I look at God as entity, like we are in essence, the relationship is like we are the cells of God. Just like we're composed of multiple cells, and in a very real way, we are the body of God. That is, if God, as far as what constitutes God's embodiment, is we make up God. And so,
would you say that mitochondria are a good parallel? As mitochondria are to cells, God would be to, say, our psyche?
This is where, like, as far as the scientists go, I'm weakest on biology. So
mitochondria.
And so, like,
mitochondria.
yeah, so probably flush out with me mitochondria. So I know the term,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure you describe how you're using it, so I don't screw up.
They're a
Yeah.
very primitive form of bacteria that is
Yeah.
not human, but they became part of eukaryotic cells long ago. They replicate along with them, and because of them, eukaryotic cells are able to process enough energy to become multicellular life forms.
Okay.
So in a way, they make us possible. You were talking about gut bacteria the other day.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
the same thing. In fact, forget mitochondria. Would you say that gut bacteria, just didn't want to reduce God to gut bacteria,
Yeah.
seems kind of disrespectful, but the gut biome, would you say that gut biome to human would be like God to human psyche? It's like it's an essential component that makes us possible.
Along those lines, I think
Okay.
we're getting on those realms, and you get to that level, like interplay, chicken egg comes a little bit questions.
That's starting to help me see what you're talking about. So
we're getting into the realm. Okay, yes, I would say that now we're getting into the realm of kind of how I'm conceptualizing it. Yes, we're starting to get in that realm.
So who was Jesus?
Well, as far the Jesus, basically, what I basically engage with Jesus is you're looking at Jesus as the embodiment of the divine. That is, you're looking at Jesus as a figure of, if you're going to look as a human being the most connected and aware of God and in tune with God, that is the figure of Jesus. That Jesus
like
represents the
Christian, or I should say, Abrahamic version of Buddha.
That probably not a bad way to look at it. Because you're looking at Buddha as the closest. If you're looking at Buddha as a way the closest a person can get to enlightenment, as close as a person in Buddha sort of get to the source. Yes, I think that'd be kind of analogous.
Okay.
So that is the limit that a human can be as far as a man embodying God. Jesus sort of represents your limit. Okay, that's as close as a human figure can be to God.
Gotcha.
You're sort of maxing out the human vessel as far as
Gotcha.
embodying
I
God.
see. What's your stance on the resurrection?
The stance on the resurrection is you have two things here. I think the real impetus and meaning behind the resurrection is not a is basically the body coming back to life. Because the thing is,
Yeah, hence the
as
term.
far as as far as a body coming back to life, that happens 10 other times in the Bible. You have 10 other instances of
That's
a
true.
body coming back in there. So if you look at that as like, is that a miracle? Okay, but it's not even that unique in the Bible. And so that's not I look at that, again, it's one of those things like, did Jesus bodily resurrect? I look at that as almost the uninteresting point. I don't look at that as the truest statement. Is Jesus came back to life? That's a statement about being. You know, I hate these. We're going to have to. This is where we're going to hit the limits of language. Is you're going to have to look at it as almost in some way as spiritual resurrections. I'm not trying to use spiritual as in voodoo. I'm saying we're at the limit of understanding, so we got to have a word to talk about it. So I'm going to talk about it as a spiritual resurrection.
What is that?
It's a constant of being. Jesus, when I'm looking at Jesus resurrected, is Jesus is still alive today. He's transcended, his being has transcended the embodiment of this. Like, I have this body. This is an embodiment. You can have a wider embodiment. So in a real way, you look at the communion, where you're drinking and eating the flesh. You look at motifs like the church being the body of Christ. I'm saying, well, that's actually a real statement in a lot of ways. Jesus I'm saying Jesus is an existing entity of this day, but his embodiment is in a way is carried by us. We, the Christian faith, the believers, they are now the body of Christ. Where Christ was embodied in this type of form, now Christ is embodied through the church to the believers. He has an entity and still existing. That is the body of Christ. That is the resurrection.
Yeah, I see.
He has,
I see it.
he has transcended a mode of existence.
It reminds me quite a bit of something that was very popular among the Romantics, transcendentalism, in which there was a sort of quasi-established belief of a world soul, and presumably a sufficiently powerful individual would make a mark on it, which is very similar to what you're describing. So I see what you're
Yes.
talking about. Was I going to? Do you think? Okay, why did Jesus say, "I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one enters the kingdom of the Father except through me"? What does that mean?
His life was that model. So if you want to achieve that, you have to live that way. So his life was a model of how to get that. And here's the thing, a concept I really love that I got from Martin Heidegger. He said there's intellectual truths and then there's existential truths. There's things that are true, but you can only know that by living them. And so I look at, that's what Jesus means by that. And so if you want to understand this truth, you're just going to have to live your life in a certain way to see it.
What if
And
you
if you don't live your life, then you won't be able to understand that truth.
No, I mean, you won't enter the kingdom of God, is what he said. What does that mean? What was he saying?
It becomes that, like, if for you to live on, because that's the ideal of like hell. It's like, if you don't live with that, you'll just basically be forgotten. Nobody's going to take up those and carry you forward. Because that's one thing, you have this motif, that we had in ancient times is people's children were very important because, they wanted to live on. In today's culture, we don't look at our children as carrying us on. Well, in ancient times, people were very much about having children because that was how you were going to, basically extend your existence into the future.
Yes.
I think you're playing on that line. If I want my existence to continue, it has to be extended into the future. Well, I need a vehicle for that to happen. I need a vehicle. There has to be that physical element. Something has to carry that. And so if you make an impact on people's lives, they will carry you forward into the future. If you don't have an impact, like it's like a bad habit. I want to get rid of bad habits. I look to expel those. And so a bad person will make an impact. That's an impact people are always going to fight to get rid of. And I'm looking at that's the difference that he's saying. If you live according to Jesus, you'll have this impact that people will hold dear and they'll carry forward. If you don't do that, you'll be that thing they're always looking to get rid of. And so that's what he's saying with that statement.
Why do you think the Bible was written the way it is, in which God is described in such a way as to hint of him being a singular being that interacts with people directly, um, uh, attacks people, and is in general a rather cruel person? Why do you think the Old Testament specifically was written like that?
And
How did they
here's
get
where,
it so off?
well, here's the thing is I don't necessarily say it got off because, that's where the God is the Father. I mean, I think, take that motif very seriously. And this is where religion's a lived experience. So, if you want to understand religion, talk about your life. So just think of a child growing up and the role a father plays into that child. So basically, and so the Bible is if you look at, just carry that motif as humanity being a child, and a child is growing up. What you have in the Old Testament is the 3 to 5 year old child. And you look at how a father figure plays there.
Who's the child?
And so basically the early Israelites, the Hebrews,
Okay.
the
You're
Old
talking
Testament
cultural
entities.
development as
Cultural
parallel
development.
to
So
childhood.
child development, yeah, is roll with that. So as a child, you have a childlike understanding. It's very black and white. And like when we teach our child, and you first teach a child, you say, do this, don't do that. You don't go into the reasons because they're not at a place where they're capable of understanding that. And so as a father, and I'm engaging a child, you'll tell your children, you'll say, don't do this. And they'll reach for something, and you have to teach them. So you'll say things that may sound harsh to the child. They touch hard, you grab them. No, don't do that. From the perspective of a child, that may seem arbitrary. Like, why did he do that? That looks very arbitrary from the point of a child. And you can't go into detail of why they shouldn't because they don't have the ability to understand. They haven't progressed enough. They will come to understand, but they're not at a level to give an explanation. I tell my children, do this, don't do that. There's more to the reason, huh?
Can you give me a specific action that God undertook in the Old Testament that this would apply to?
To narrow it down to basics through there, I think you see a lot of it, essentially, in Deuteronomy, as he's given 613 commandments. There's and you look at Jesus, later on, he kind of boils that down to the Sermon on the Mount. So he kind of takes the Old Testament and reduces it down to very few saying principles. God can't give out broad principles. He's got to lay out, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And there's certain things in the Old Testament that seem very arbitrary. Like, why do we have dietary rules and restrictions?
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the arbitrary rules. I'm talking about the inhumane.
Well, I'm just saying that, we'll get there because the arbitrary rules are building something. Because the first thing you're dealing with is like a child has to survive and live. And so I won't give them these arbitrary rules because it's like same deal. I'm trying to give them examples. Here's all these rules. There's a common theme behind these rules, but I can't teach you that common thing until you have a bunch of examples. Now, if I gave you 30 examples, do this, don't do this. Like, what's the purpose of having dietary rules? Is you're setting up a culture, and so we have to have things that we can point to that make us, that make us a group, and those things are going to be arbitrary, but they're also necessary. For us to have cohesion, we got to build a point thing that makes us alike. So let's do certain things alike. Are those things arbitrary? Yes, they are, but they're also needed. We need to have things in common. It doesn't matter necessarily what those are because we have to have a common frame of reference to communicate. And so if we don't have a common frame of reference, we can't even communicate. And so we just got to pick some. Well, the things we pick are, by definition, will be arbitrary, but they're also necessary. And so it's kind of like,
Can you give an
to pick
example
out.
of one that was necessary?
As far as dietary rules and those, again, none of those are necessary, but we have to have a way to sort of, if we're going to be a people, we have to have boundaries.
Yeah,
We sort of got to fence
yeah, I'm
ourselves in.
very much on board
And
with
so,
the
it's
Bible
really,
as
so
a
you ask for,
cultural
so,
anchor.
and so establishing a culture, like, no, any one thing is going to be necessary, but we have to have something to build around. So at the end of the day, none of those are going to be necessary other than the fact that we have to have something.
I do want to come back to Deuteronomy,
Yeah.
definitely, because I don't see how anyone who was inspired by the being you described could possibly get it that wrong. A lot of those laws, quite a few of them, are Marquis de Sade level cruel. Um, but that we could talk
And
about that all day. Just a quick
yeah,
question: what's your take on the flood? Metaphor, local
uh,
event, worldwide?
the, 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 the flood's is a metaphor.
Okay,
It's a metaphor that, you know, it makes sense in a way. And I kind of explain it like this. So you got to look at what's a world. A world, is in a modern perspective. We have a very broad view. The world is the entirety of the earth.
the entire what?
If you look, the world is the entirety of the earth.
Yes.
You know, if I grow up, so if I'm in a person of ancient time, I most people never left their valley.
Mm-hmm.
Their world was the valley.
Mm-hmm.
There could be some out there, but when they talk about their world is going to be everything that occurs in that valley.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a lot of people, they would never leave this small geographic area.
Right.
And so, if a flood comes, a typical big flood,
Right.
and it
Which
wipes
did
away everything
happen.
I do,
It did. In fact, it
then
happened specifically
if
there. It's called the Iraqi
yeah,
floodplain for a reason.
yeah. And so, if I say my world was flooded,
Right.
well, if that could be a valley. From my perspective, that's a very true statement.
Mm-hmm.
The entire world flooded.
I,
Everything I knew
right.
was covered by water.
I got you. And
That transcends into a global flood.
yes, and I am completely on board with that.
Yeah.
A, did God cause it? B, why is he written as having wanted to or needed to do so? It kind of frames him in a bad light, don't you think?
It
And
does.
it is the only time in the Bible that I can think of where he admits to being wrong, sort of, by showing the rainbow, sort of.
Yeah, and on motifs like that, I think there's several things that we got to remember that are in play here. Everything that like start as an oral tradition, and so
Can you repeat
if
that
you
last
have an
thing?
oral tradition. Everything in the Bible started as an oral tradition, like the Old
Yes.
Testament. That started as an oral tradition.
Well, I would say especially the Pentateuch.
Yeah.
I assume you're familiar with the four sources theory, the
Yes.
J, the P.
Yeah, the four sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that. So I forget the name. You have the Jehovah's, Levi. So yeah, there's the four source theory
Right.
on it through those. So you have an oral tradition,
Right. And I do
and
believe
so
the
like
J is like the oldest and the most based on oral,
yeah,
I believe.
I forget some because I know like recently in the '70s, they've started pulling back on those, but that general idea of you have a multi-source theory, like that's what's encapsulating, and I think that's absolutely true. You had what we had the Pentateuch was, most likely pulled together in a basically in a Babylonian exile by a common editor. I think most dates on that is like 800 BC, where everything was sort of pulled together, and that was the first actual written down when you have the Old Testaments that date.
Yes,
But
it was the priests, I believe, who did it, right? And this is actually where,
yeah,
you were talking about
yeah,
the main. I think the original purpose of the Bible was as a cultural anchor, because it was originally compiled during a time when the Jews very much, or the early Israelites, could have been completely absorbed by the surrounding culture, if memory serves. And that's happened more than once. And I noticed that each time the Bible takes on a different flavor. Like, for instance, Sheol used to be the afterlife during the time of the Old Testament, but then you get Greek influence, and all of a sudden, the Elysian fields and Tartarus become heaven and hell as we know it now.
Exactly, because I mean, because the Jews didn't really have a concept of the afterlife. I mean, that was something that kind of came in later. If you go to Jewish tradition,
What did they
they
think
don't
happened?
really
That you
have it.
just die and
Just sort of died. I think that a lot of that comes in a culture. Like if you're looking to just survive, you're not
I think
thinking
all
about
of
what
it comes
happens
from
after.
culture.
Well, that interpretation of it, because I mean, because part of religion is addressing concerns. If you're just at the point of trying to survive, you're not really worried about what happens after. You're not worried about it. It's not a
Yeah,
question you're asking.
Maslow's scale of
It,
need.
you look at it. It's not a deal like that's not the case. You're not worried about it. You're not asking that question. You're not asking the question of what happens after, because just getting to the next day is so precarious.
Yeah, like I was saying.
That is so precarious. It just wasn't a question they were asking. But with it, but when you have stuff like Noah's in a flood, you're transmitting information, and so like if you're transmitting information, the story is a good way to do that. Like I have to transmit information. Well, how do you remember that? Well, you have the story, and so the story takes on a lot of things. Like the way we read stories now is much different because we're used to written language, and so you can put stuff down there, and the format is going to preserve meaning. Well, with oral traditions, I can't do that. So I can't have technical terms because nobody's going to remember it. But if you have stories and I have vehicles, well, these vehicles become the source of the meaning. Like the characters and all those become the mode of transportation of meaning.
Yeah.
Because I can remember a story. Like I can remember a story because if I get certain parts wrong, I can keep enough fidelity of the story to have that transfer of meaning.
And that's
And
why
so,
writing is so much better than oral tradition.
oh, it
Because,
is. You can transmit so much more information.
well, the story, especially
Yeah.
properly preserved, the story doesn't change. It lives as long as the document, whatever's carrying it. Whereas if it's just in my head, I can change it at whim, or I could be mistaken. Um, uh, that's it. That's all I was going to say. Um,
But to
which
speak to your point,
it's rather interesting.
yeah,
How old do you
yeah,
think language is?
uh,
Let me follow that up with a theory of
yeah,
mine. Excuse me, a conjecture, not a theory, conjecture.
yeah,
We've seen, or we've discovered, we as a species have
yeah,
discovered cave paintings that are 40,000 years old,
yeah,
and that's art.
yeah.
I don't think it's plausible that those people were able to mix paint and apply it into shapes that are representative of things that we today can recognize if they weren't able to speak in some way comparable to how you and I are communicating right now. So I would say that language is at least 40,000 years old. Do you
I
think
agree
that makes
absolutely.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like and and that stuff's thing is because you have proto languages. Like pointing. Is the start of a proto language. So it can go back further than that. Even some animals, they have dogs communicate. There's a
Quite a
proto
few, as a
language.
matter of fact.
Yeah,
Quite a
yeah,
few animals have rather, I mean, not to our level, but they do have
yeah,
complex forms of communication. I think the study of animal intelligence has boomed recently.
yeah,
And I think part of that is due to the fact that we have so many cameras now. We catch them doing things that we didn't see before. Like I think there are ravens and crows in
mm,
certain countries that have learned how to use the crosswalk or learned how to use the subway, which is
mm,
amazing. Like when I was a kid, that was unthinkable. It was unthinkable to attribute any level of intelligence to an animal, other than say a dog.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, and crows are amazing. Yeah, crows are amazingly intelligent.
crows are crazy smart. Octopi.
Yeah, it's
By the way, I'm old
or
school.
same
I
thing
still
too.
say
Yeah,
octopi.
yeah,
That's my favorite. I love them there. But we're getting off topic.
yeah,
Here's a question.
yeah.
This is going to sound a bit 70s, so go with me.
Okay.
Could an animal be religious? Excuse me, could a non-human animal be religious?
My initial instinct would be to say no, because I don't know if they have that level of comprehension yet. Right now I would say no, because again, I look at one of those. It's like
Here, here's a question.
until you have language, I don't
Yeah,
think you could be able to really have the
I
concepts like that.
I think the abstract
Yeah,
nature of it, especially to the degree that you describe.
yeah,
I don't want to say your God. What I mean is the
yeah,
neighborhood of pantheistic deity, or the all, whatever. Let me not stumble over my words. If you were to artificially increase an animal's intelligence, could that animal, that non-human entity, then attain religion?
I believe so. I think once you hit a certain level of intelligence, religion follows. I mean, just from a simple fact, we have every example we have of advanced intelligence of humans. Every culture, they have religion. I mean, we don't have one that doesn't. And so I
Yeah,
think at
that's
a certain
interesting, isn't
point,
it?
yeah. And that's another reason, like, I look at that as
Well, sort of. Do you consider Buddhism a religion?
I do. I consider Buddhism a religion. It is dealing with those questions of ultimate reality and ultimate concerns.
Okay.
I very much
Yeah, sold.
view,
I agree.
view
Yeah.
view religion as that.
Would you say though that
Their answer is different.
yeah, would you say though
Yeah.
that it definitely treads the line? Like it looks very much like a complicated philosophy, more than
It,
more dogmatic faiths such as the Abrahamic faiths.
it does absolutely,
Yeah.
and that's as people practice Buddhism, when you get the actual practices, they look a little bit more sane. It's the same token. If you take just a base of any religion,
Hmm.
it's very different than how it's practiced. If I
Honest,
gave my Bible and had
there's so much to it.
yeah.
God, how many holy books are officially part of Buddhism? Is it like you could fill a library, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's absolutely a ton of them. I mean, it gets very much in there. There's absolutely a ton of those, and and I know a little bit about Buddhism, but I'm always reluctant because just from living in Christian tradition,
Hmm.
if you that cursory view of a religion, you're probably not getting it right. Like, you don't really get a religion until you're in the culture and can understand it. If
Fair.
just even it's very difficult if you didn't grow up in it. You need that growing up. It's like learning language. I'm trying to learn Spanish right now, and there's levels. Like, even when you're fluent, there's a level between fluency and native speaker. And some people can never, no matter how long you study, you cannot just get to native speaker. Like, you can become fluent, and then there's the next barrier of native speaker. And just be able to talk as like a native speaker, just is a level some people can never achieve.
Yeah,
If you just didn't,
I'm glad to
yeah,
hear you say some people because there are, of
yeah.
course, people who
Oh yeah,
do.
absolutely.
But I'll be the first to tell you it is unnervingly difficult. But I was going to ask, what drew you specifically to Christianity? Because I know you have studied comparative religions, therefore you do
Mm.
um, know of others. You certainly had your pick because you said, well, first, before I even get there, you said
Yeah,
you were a former atheist. Were you
correct.
an atheist or were you an agnostic or somewhere in between? Because there are different
The way I
shades.
always there's a way I always sort of phrase that, because again, like, it's sort of, for me being atheist, it sort of depends on what you're presenting as God.
Hmm.
I consider myself a pretty hard atheist. When I look at that time, like, you know if you have a conception, I will listen to it. But the way God presented, the classical monotheism of the triomni God, I'm like, okay, that just doesn't exist. Like, I would flat out say no, absolutely not. Can't, that conception cannot exist. Cannot.
Right.
And so I was of that flavor of it. If you want to throw something else out there, I'll listen to it, and I got apprehend those. But I was very much saying, no, I'm an atheist. I didn't take a position, I'm agnostic. I would say, you know what? You always have to allow for, is there a possibility? Yes. At
Hey,
the same level
I'm always hurt by
I'm a
so
Boltzmann brain level. That's the level I looked at it. I have to allow that. In theory, could I be a Boltzmann brain? Well, sure.
Right.
If we're going to
I'm
be that
very pleased to hear
pedantic,
you say that
if I'm
because,
going to be that pedantic,
yeah,
then yeah, you could say I'm an agnostic, but no, I just,
no, I'm
not
not
a
going to
real
put words in your
possibility.
mouth.
Yeah.
But I do want to address what you were
Yeah.
talking about, possibility. And this is why I, no offense, don't
Yeah.
like philosophy. I prefer literature. And I think that's a
Yeah.
better way of exploring these ideas, which ironically is something that you brought up with
Mm.
the Bible and specifically Jesus using stories. But sorry, I'm getting off topic. Um, oh, shoot, I lost the point. We were talking about, oh, possibility. And you were talking about the
Mm.
Boltzmann brain. And that's a good way of segueing into this. Quote unquote, allowing for the possibility. There's absolute, to the best of my knowledge, and you're the philosopher, can you actually say anything for certain? I don't think there is a way to philosophically say anything for certain. There's always going to be a way to pick it apart. So I don't think it's fair to ask someone when they take a stance on a belief or lack of belief in God, well, what about that 1% or whatever you want to ascribe to it? Once it's lost all practicality in understanding, then, or applicability, why can't we say we're certain?
I think you can, because it really, like, I think, in everyday use, when you're saying certainty, you're saying here's this class of belief
Mm-hmm.
that is so foundational. When I'm saying I'm certain, I'm saying it's with that class. Like you're saying, it's in the realm of, the sun coming up tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a
Exactly.
logical possibility? It doesn't? Sure. But there's a level of certainty attached to that.
Right.
And so every time you're saying certainty, really, I think there's no point in being super pedantic. When you're saying you're certain, it's saying it's of the classification with this group of knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
as a pure logical possibility that could be wrong,
Right.
but that's getting to a level of, well, if you don't know those, you know nothing else. And so you have this core set of beliefs where you go, okay, when I'm saying certain, it's in line with those. And so I think it's perfectly fair for an atheist to say, well, I'm certain, because you're saying it's my belief in this is of the nature of these other type of
Well,
things.
good.
I'm existing. There's other people in the world. The sun comes up
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Right.
It's in that realm. It's on those level of when I use the word.
It's
And I
it's
think
a relief.
and that,
It's a
yeah,
relief to hear you say that.
yeah.
I have spoken to others who didn't say that.
Well,
And I'm
and
sure you
that's
have
being
too.
pedantic. It is. And that's just being pedantic, trying to win a point. Oh, you say you're certain. Well, yeah. Do we
Eh,
want to get ridiculous or do we want to have a conversation?
if you've ever talked
I,
to postmodernists, relativists, deconstructivists, etc.
yeah.
But back to, okay, so you were a rather certain, or rather, yeah, rather certain atheist.
Yeah.
Something happened that, and you had a vast array of knowledge. You have a degree, a minor, correct, in comparative religion. So you do have your pick.
Yes.
What caused you to funnel your attention into, no, that's it, it's Christianity. And this happened
Honestly,
recently, correct?
yeah, really comes down to this. You have all those, and a lot of it. You start looking at religion stuff like those. It comes down to that point is, you know, it's basically like I went through life. I had a business. So I got divorced, and it wasn't anything bad. Like I had like no. It wasn't like a life crisis, but you get to certain deals like now I'm at a transition point in my life. Okay, I wasn't a person who divorced. I wasn't upset. I'm like, okay, this is great. Like I'm 40 years old. I have a good resources. It's like the way I framed it is like I'm 20 again. And when you're 20, you always say, I wish I could live life knowing what I know now. And
Hmm.
it's like I'm a 20, I have all the possibilities and a lot more knowledge. So how do I go about it? And so I just really reflect, okay, well, how do I go about life? Like, at a certain point, it's like, because I'm a philosopher and you're dealing with this, you're trying to find all these true things. Like, a common thing of atheists, the phrase, I want to know as many true things as possible and a few false things. And that was kind of how I organized my life.
Hmm.
And you sort of look at it, it's like, okay, like I live life and try to figure it out, and here's where I'm at. Well, I want to do something different. And well, I got to look objectively. Well, if I go through and I don't change something, well, am I going to be back in this situation where I build a life and it kind of comes apart? Like, so how do I approach it? And honestly, when you start talking about religion, what really happened is I had a grandmother who was a Christian, and with and she was one of those, like, she's just, I'll look at somebody, if you want to look as an exemplary Christian, the best example you could live in. Like, she was like one of those people, like, she believed it, but she never forced it upon anybody. She didn't question the is this right? She just lived it, and she went through so many tragedies in her life. Like, she went through unimaginable tragedies. And the thing that always struck me about her, like, she never complained about anything. I'm just thankful I'm here today. And like, I look at her life and I'm like, fuck, I might be bitching. But she just never had a complaint. She was always grateful. And so that kind of left the mark for me. I looked at her, when I was an atheist, I looked at her worldview and I said, well, it's not right. But you start looking broad-based, it's like, well, and it's where you get into different models, of what you actually know. And then you start looking, what's my purpose? And it's like, do I want to be right or live a productive life? Like, what's really my goal here? And it's making a choice. Like, my goal, I want to live a certain kind of life. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going for. And I looked at sort of like her and her engaging this religion. I'm going, I looked at it as being wrong, but what am I looking at a different way? Because one thing that really kind of left a mark on me is, like, I did a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I did that for years. And you start getting that. Like, there's certain things to understand. You have to live through it to see the truth. From the outside, it makes no sense. Like, if I want to teach you a move or explain it to you, as I got more into it, I realized I can't explain what I'm doing to people. They'd ask me, how are you doing this?
How far?
Well, I have this level. I was a black belt. Yeah.
You got a black belt?
Oh yeah. I was massively competitive. Oh yeah. I traveled the world competing. Oh my God. I was.
Hey, congratulations, sir. That took a while, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you get part of that is like, as you try to explain, I started to let the impressions, but people ask me how I'm doing this. I'm like, well, you can't even understand what I'm doing. I'm operating on a level of understanding that you just don't have access to. And the only way you to get there is to live through it. Like, I can explain it to you, but my words will make no sense until you have an experience, and then you'll understand. And so I started looking at religion like that. I'm like, is it true? Then I said, well, is there truth there? Is it a situation where these people have a different concern? I look at, like my grandmother wasn't concerned about being right. She was concerned about living. Well, is this something, there's some value there? So I kind of said, you know what? What's the buy-in? You got to accept there's a God. Okay, I'll accept there's a God. I'm just not going to claim to know what it is. I'm just going to take it, okay, let me just run with it for a bit. Let me just give it a shot, because what the hell not? It worked for her. Is there value there? Let me just, realize it. Is this a truth that has to be lived? And I will start living it and see if there's anything there. Mm-hmm. See if this has any meaning. And so that's how I came to it. I started to live it. I said, I'm going to live it and just start living it and see if there's anything there to be had from it. I know I can look from the outside and say, okay, all this stuff doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And so as I started doing that, I started realizing, okay, religion's a different perspective. The best way I do it, like, science is life from a third person perspective. Science is a language and a way of viewing life. Is I'm going to remove myself from it. Then here's what I see. Religion is, if I'm in the middle of it, I'm describing and using a language from my experience and how I'm experiencing life. And so religion is a different language. It's not about describing the world in an accurate way. It's about setting yourself relationally right. And the words I'm using, I'm not trying to mirror reality. I'm trying to put myself in relation to reality. And so, I'm not trying to, quote unquote, be right from a God's eye view. I'm in the middle of it. And in the middle of it, I want to have a language that's experiential language. And so I look at, a lot of religious talk, and it's not talk of descriptions of the world, it's descriptions of the lived experience. And so we're using a language, I'm trying to describe how I am there in the midst and how it seems and feels to me. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish with that language. I'm communicating a truth, but it's a lived experience truth and not a standing outside of it truth. I am in the midst of it, living life, looking all around. I'm not detached from life in doing that. And so I look at it as like you have a scientific language and a religious language. If I try to understand the religious language from the scientific perspective, well, no, none of it's going to make sense because that's not the point. They're not trying to describe the world, the features of it, because who cares? That's not the concern. I'm here, what do I do? What do I do? Now that I'm here, what do I do? And that's what it's speaking from. It's speaking from that and from that perspective. And so when I started looking at it that way, it's like, okay, now this stuff can make sense. And there's bridges between the two. And, because, as I'm going through this, I'm not going to drop my rationality out of the door. I'm not going to say the scientific understanding's wrong. It's not. But what it is a different perspective. It's answering a different question.
That I see what you're talking about. I want to say I agree with you, but I definitely see what you're talking about, and I can see how one lives that way, and that is obviously a good reason to convert. Quite a few questions.
Okay.
I was going to ask you what you think hell is, or do you think it even exists? But remind me later, bridges between the two.
Yeah.
And
Bridges,
people who do jettison science for the sake of religion, do you think that's necessary? Why do you think they do it? So, it's a lot of really interesting things that you brought up. But focusing on this, because I actually do want to cover how close to what's described in the Bible fits into how you see God. Do you think there's an afterlife? And is there a hell involved?
Here's the thing. As far as the hell goes, I look at that, like hell is an annihilation. I think hell is an annihilation. Basically, hell is annihilation. I think when you get like the modern conceptions, that's where you sort of get the human bringing those in there. It's like, it's like we want to see justice, and it's like it seems like just not existing doesn't get enough. So, like hell is something that got built up. This we get like other traditions kind of bleed in, and hell's I look at hell as annihilation. It's not a part. Well, the whole concept there. We have hell, like you just stop existing, and as far as the afterlife, like that's something, like when I'm engaged like that, I spend the least time on that because, again, I'm still trying to get the living part right. Like, well, I'm going to worry about what's after. I get the living part right first.
Fair enough.
And so, so when I'm viewing the afterlife in, it is some on those. Like, I look at that concept. Like, what does it mean to continue living on? I think, that's what that model of Jesus comes in. That sort of saying, like, okay, to be resurrected means you go into the life after this one. I look at afterlife as your life after this one. Is you're living on through your ancestors, through those. Because I look at that way, because again, like, you you hear this at funerals, and I think when we say it, it's the idea of, like when somebody dies, there's that sense of them still being with you. Because I look at some of the, people that are very prominent in my life. I had like my father, my grandmother, a few people that are very, very prominent in my life. And, when you have them leave, you start thinking about that. It's like you start realizing that these people had such an impact on you that in a lot of ways you still carry them. Like you can almost carry on a conversation with them because you're such in tune with them. You almost know what they would say. Like I would say this, like I could almost have a conversation with my father because I know what he would say. I could have a conversation with my grandmother because I sort of know what she would say. And I look at that afterlife as like I'm carrying them forward, like they're existing within me. Like, and that may not be this attractive way that people want to think of it, but well, that's just what it is. That's the continued existence. The parameters, how that works, I don't know, but that is the form of it, though. I don't view heaven as like this place you go and physically inhabit. That's just kind of ridiculous. I look at it. It's not a bad way to try to get the concept. If I want to tell a child, they think in spatial temporal terms. So it's sort of like a place. Because I am, having a diverse existence, well, you're sort of still located in a way. And so that's how you sort of introduce a child to the concept. And some people just don't grow beyond that. Like people look at heaven as a physical place. Well, it's not that. It's not exactly like that. It's not exactly not like that either. It's a bridge gap. And so this concept of heaven being a place, it's not something that's true. It's a way to get you from a very concrete thinking to more enlightened thinking. I just need some way to start moving you there. And that's sort of a waypoint of understanding that some people don't get beyond. Does it hurt if you misconceive it like that? No, because you're still going to conduct your life. And that's where like religion is about. It's about orienting your life. Is my concept of heaven right versus they're wrong? It's an orientation. Again, what's important is orienting yourself to live because there's something more. That's the real at there. Are you going to know that? Well, you're not going to know it till you get there, but it's that concept that there's something more. And even more than that is living as if there's something more. Like those are important concepts. And so, and that's where you got an idea. Like when you hear talking about heaven, that's when that's where, approach it from religious language. You're in the midst of life living. And the truth of that statement is I have to orient my behavior. That's what's true about it. What's true is it's orienting me in a way that I need to be towards life. And that's how the statement is true. If I want to pull back from a scientific understanding and try to translate that language and just try to take that wording, it's not going to make any sense. Well, I got to translate that language. Again, a first person lived language is different from a third person lived language. And if I want to have those mean something, I have to translate the talk because I got different perspectives or different languages and I have to translate. I can't take those words from the first person language and try to implant them without translation in a third person language because it won't make sense. It's going to be contradictory. It's going to sound stupid. And it does. Like heaven as a place sounds stupid. From a physicalist, third person, logical perspective, it just sounds dumb. Like how does that work? How the mechanics of it? It doesn't make any sense because you have to translate it first. If I don't translate it, of course it doesn't make sense. It's not meant to. It's a different language. So if I take a Spanish phrase and try to bring it to English, I don't translate it, it's going to be gibberish. It's not going to make sense. And so that's what I think happens a lot for religion. We have to translate those languages.
I think I see what you mean. I have been needing a break. Can we?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Dead air, and I'll just come back.
Yeah, come back. Sounds good.
You having fun so far?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's a good talk.
Me too. I'll be back, sir. I'll be back. Hopefully that didn't take too long.
No, we're good.
Let's test your mic again. I didn't quite hear you.
Are you hear me? Good?
I can, yes.
All right, good.
We have gone over time, but I would like to continue a little bit longer.
Yeah, like I said, I'm free. I'm good forever. So
you like being retired, eh?
Oh, yeah, it's a plus. You don't have to do anything, so that's a good thing about it.
Let's see. This is off topic, but what got you into jiu-jitsu?
I basically worked my way through. Basically, when I got my degree, I was working my way through college. I started a business, and it's something I always just liked. I just was drawn to it. It's one of those days. It's that aspect of I loved it. It's like you're going against a person, and the way the sparring works, there's no doubt who wins. It's like a certainty there. You go to jiu-jitsu, and it's like you win or you lose, and there's certainty there, and like that and it's that struggle. Two people, like. Because basically, it's almost like I'm trying to kill you, you're trying to kill me, and it's all safe. Yeah. Because if you get a submission, it's to the point where if I'm choking you, I can kill you. If I get you in a chokehold, it's like, okay, now I'm at a point that if we don't tap, you die. And so it's that level of certainty. It's like, that was just cool. I was just drawn to it.
There's no sport like it, is there?
Yeah, there's nothing like it. It's really cool. I loved it.
I've been interested ever since I saw Hoist Gracie submit
Oh
Kimo
yeah,
Leopoldo.
that's what got me into it. I saw the first UFCs. I'm like,
It's
oh shit, I gotta
amazing.
try that.
Yeah,
Just
I
gotta
was
try
like,
that.
because if you knew Kimo, you
Oh
know he
yeah,
didn't throw that fight.
no,
Like the guy who carries a cross into the
yeah,
ring is not the kind of guy who throws a fight.
no, 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 no. And
That
so
guy is that guy's a different breed. Do you have any advice for a white belt who just got his first stripe 2 weeks ago?
don't worry about it. Just learn the moves and don't think too deep. Don't worry about counter stuff like that. As you're going through, you're just building up your base, know what's going on. Never overthink too much. It's like what I tell people is like you're white and blue belt, learn the techniques, try to do stuff, don't think of weird counters. Because
Have fun.
yeah, because what'll end up happening, then it'll click. Like I used to tell people, I knew more moves as a blue belt than I did as a black belt. Because once I got to a black belt, it's kind of weird. Like, when I got to black belt, I would just do two or three things. That's all I ever did. But I knew how to get every situation into my two or three things. Like I would just use a couple of sweeps. That's all I ever do. But no matter what it was, I knew how to funnel you into those. And I loved it because we'd roll black belts and you'd have this massive interchanges and you're just going to move. And the whole time you're there, you're aware of it. Like, you know what's going on. And so you'd have a 3-minute row you could talk about for 10 minutes. I was here looking for that and feeling you there and all this. And there's so much going on. It's the level of stuff you can comprehend. I just got to where I love it because it's the same deal. Like as a blue belt, I think about move this. As a black belt, I'm just feeling. I feel your shift. I feel you're off balance. And so I'm looking for like off balance, your hips out of place. And I'm this constant state of feeling. As soon as I feel a certain thing, I just know how to react. And so you're training reactions. And when you're first, just don't overthink. Just be dumb. Just get the mechanics. Just learn the things. Then as you get going, you can start tailoring your own game, building your own games.
Thank you. I'm probably going to go over this part of the conversation the
Yeah.
most, assuming it makes the cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great fun. The injury recovery, though, man.
Oh,
But back onto topic.
yeah.
Let's see. We touched on the afterlife. Let's see. Would you say that there's a basic truth to all religion?
I actually do. And because that's one thing, like, if you're going to be in a faith, you have to deal with that. It's like, okay, I'm saying I am a Christian. And I have to look around and there's Islam, Buddhism, there's Hindus, there's Taoism, you have all these other things. Like what's going
Is
on?
Taoism a religion?
That's a gray area,
Yeah. It reminds me of Buddhism, except more so.
Yeah, I mean, Taoism, like, I enjoy the Tao, like, I would say it is, but it's hitting those gray areas on it through those. I think,
Please go on. I interrupted you.
yeah. But but dealing with a Christian, you have to sort of deal with that. It's like, okay, like, here's the way I'll always envision people there. It's religions are, again, it comes down to the idea of language. Religion is not about, it's not about describing the world. That's not really what it's about. If I'm describing something, they're going to be, you can say, well, there's going to be only one description. Religions are about paths. Look, it's a way of talking about something because I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to move. So we always look at people there, is I'm at the base of a mountain. How do I get to the top? From where I'm at, there's going to be a truth about how to get there. There's going to be a path that if I follow it, it will get me there. And that's a true path. It's going to lay out, here's your obstacles. You get to this section, here's your handholds. And so it's going to give me a set of directions. And from where I'm at, those directions are true and valid. If I try to move another spot, those aren't true anymore. And so I look at religions, it's starting points. From, if you're giving me directions on how to get somewhere, where I'm starting and what I'm going through is going to be different. So I look at religions, there's sets of different directions. And when people want to say they're contradictions, yes, but you're approaching it from the wrong way. It's like, I can't really evaluate Islam. I never grew up in an Islamic country. I can go read the Quran. I haven't really encapsulated that faith. I don't really know the context that was written in there. I can't really get to it. I can study Buddhism. I can study Hinduism. I really can't get to those faiths because you have these religious texts, and they say something, but they're also situated in an environment. And I really can't access those. And so in the day, what I can say about Christianity is from my perspective, there's truth. It will get me to a place that I want to go. It will serve the purpose I want it to feel. And so I look at this, it's not either or situations. It's not like I'm similarly like, for my religion to work, I have to make a statement. I have to say it is true. I have to hold to that. And I'm understanding what it's saying from is for me to get here to there, this path will get me here. I can trust into it. It's a true path from where I'm at to where I want to go.
So, I think you've answered everything that I had in mind, other than like going back to like the laws in Deuteronomy and also Numbers and Leviticus and I think also Exodus. But as I said, I wanted to save that for a later time, if that's fine with you.
Yeah, because that's one of those things, like you get in Deuteronomy, like the same situation. Those things have to be addressed, but and because from the outside looking, that's one of the biggest attacks against it. But and that's where I really push against viewing God's kind of Morgan Freeman concept. Because we touched this a little bit the other day. Is like I look at that and it's like that is what I call it. It's a simplifying assumption. Again, it's like when you have religion and where a lot of these concepts developed, you're dealing with people that are very low literacy rates. And so you got to religion developed at very low literacy rates.
Religion developed what?
During a time of very, very low literacy rates. Yes. People couldn't read and write.
Right.
And it's not that people are unintelligent. Like the level of intelligence.
There is a pervasive belief that people back in the day were somehow less intelligent than them, but that's not the case. It's very much, I think our world is built upon, as many scientists have said, standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
Because of other people's sacrifices and discoveries that we have what we have. It's not that we are more intelligent.
But like the getting involved in complex concepts, if you can't read and write, it's hard to engage very, very complex concepts because you need that time to be able to go back and reread it. Go back there and structure arguments. Like the access of writing lets you get much more complex in your thought. And so if you have people that don't read and write, you got to be in very simplistic terms. And so this model of God like that, it's not accurate, but it gets the information that needs to go. So it's basically, if I'm going to talk to a child, it's not these people they had the intelligence of a child, but the concepts they were working with were at the level of a child. Like they're not dumb, but as far as the intellectual concepts and toolkit they have, just limited. And so think of God like this. And so that's a good simplifying concept. You're going to have a lot of problems, but the problems you have are like, they're not going to be able to pick apart the problems of the paradox of omnipotence. They're not working with that level of complex philosophical understanding. It's very simple. And so, God's all-powerful, knows everything. Okay, he's like this. He's like a dad that knows everything. Oh, I can relate to that.
I get it.
I can deal with that. Yeah. And so, if you try to take that model and keep working with it, you're going to run into all kinds of problems because it's a model. It's a simplistic model meant for a simplistic understanding. And so, when you deal with Deuteronomy, and so I think what happens is theologians go and they learn to try to work with that model and realize it's a bad model. Because it does raise those problems. But you do have the problem of the Old Testament. Like, why is that stuff there? And I think there's answers to that. They might not be answers people like. But let me bring up one thing, that I think that happens a lot, that we got to deal with. And that's why I don't like those models of omnipotence. If you ask me, like, can I get you a watermelon?
A what?
A watermelon. Say, I want to give you a watermelon. You say, look, I want you to show your power. I want you to give me a watermelon. Now, if I go out and plant a seed and I grow it, and 3 months later I go, here's your watermelon, did I do what you asked? Mm-hmm. And so what I think happens is like people, I look at that as being a valid answer. Like, you want me a watermelon? Okay, I'll go grow one. There's a process I got to go through. I can get you one, but I got to go this process. And I can't snap my fingers and make it materialize. I can't do that. And that's why I don't like the concept of omnipotence. If I say, get me a watermelon, I grow one, well, I've done that, but I didn't materialize out of nothing. Well, I'm saying God...
And this is in keeping with how you describe
Yeah.
I know you don't like the term pantheistic, but I can't think of one that's not.
Yeah, I always say I think it's a fair one to say. Just it's not wrong. I always like Tillich. He says there's a God beyond God. That hints at pantheism. It really does. And so I don't think it's wrong to assign that label. I'm not saying it's wrong.
What do you think of the deistic view?
The deist is by nature impersonal, and so I'm not following that. I have a relationship. I just don't experience it that way. Could that be the correct one? Am I anthropomorphizing everything? Again, I can't be certain, like anything else, but I don't think that's the case. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it does not align with what you said about
God
being the source of the universe, and you also said you don't see him as outside of it.
No.
You didn't say that. You said he's not outside of time. I think that's what you said.
God's not a figure like, again, it's not like this figure who can stand outside of it. It's not like, but as soon as, you see God stand outside, God's not some embodied being standing outside of time. I don't think that makes sense. I just don't. I don't even know what you do with that. I just don't think that's the way it is.
Would you? Would it be fair to say
because then like all those problems you see hold true. If God is this figure that can stand outside like that, then I think the world would be different. It would be different if that was the case. I'm looking at because the world is the way it is. That says, well, that can't be the way God is, because we would. It's a valid thing to say, well, it should be different then. Well, that's valid. It should be.
Right.
If that was the case.
One of the most famous questions that people ask atheists is, "What would convince you?" And when I give my criteria, it would be a different world. Like for me to be convinced, specifically Jehovah, as he's described in the Bible, we would have to be living in a different world. It would have to work differently. There would have to be, because think about it, the character as he's written in the Bible is very hands-on, doesn't like to be defied, and sees very specific thing as defiance. So no, to take that seriously, life itself would be very different. I wouldn't have to be convinced. That's another thing about Jehovah in the Bible. As the character, not how you're describing it, but on the page. You don't really have a disbelief possible. It's just disobedience. Because at no point, Jonah, Job, Adam, Eve, Noah, Abraham, he speaks directly to them. And at no point is there doubt. You see what I mean? So, that is one thing that I've always said when someone asks me, well, what would convince you? But would you say also that by necessity, our definition of God has changed in response to the developments that we've made over the years?
It has changed. Our perception of God has changed, and that's another thing. That
no, I didn't say perception, though. I said definition.
Definition. No, the definition has changed. Our definition of God has changed, And I look at that as it should change. I think, what happens, in these debates is like this model of God has to be locked in, so that's the case. But if everything else, anything else that we encounter, our conceptions of like our scientific understanding, all those things changes. As our positions change, we get new perspectives. And so our descriptions, our understanding, that should change. They should evolve. And that's another thing about God too. If God's a being, God should evolve. Beings evolve. Beings change. The way God interacts with people should change. If God is static, that's not a being. A static thing is a table and a rock. If you're a being, you undergo change. You should change. You must change. That's part of being a being, is change and evolution.
That's not exactly how I meant it. But
That's not how you meant it?
here's a question.
Yeah.
When you interact with other Christians, how do they react with your ideas?
And that's the thing, is with other Christians, what you'll find is like, this is oddly enough, like I went to a church that was very much a fundamentalist type church. Like they were much more biblical literist.
Time frame, when?
Before I went to Belize. This is before I went to Belize, about two and a half years ago. So basically I was there, once I became a Christian, I was there probably about a year and a half before I moved to Belize. And they were the kind of church that spoke in tongues, whole 9 yards. Like they were, take the Bible literally. Mm-hmm. And so like, I have a different understanding, but, and this is part of that, like, we're speaking a language about God. So like those kind of questions of does God exist, it doesn't come up in those time frames. We're speaking about God, and we spoke just fine. So I'm talking.
Like you and them?
The other members of the church. Gotcha. And so like, I'm not getting philosophical on through those, because we're there for religion. And so did they take it literally? And I'm probably not. And I knew that was a difference. Well, yeah, I recognize that. But again, I'm there to worship, not to philosophize. We're there to understand God. And so this is the language we have to use. That's part of what religion is a language. And that's the one thing about it. When you adopt a language, you adopt certain benefits just by speaking it. And so we're talking about God and the power of God and feeling God's presence. And so I know what they're saying. They know what I'm saying. I talk about theology with them, but I'm not trying to bring in a scientific understanding of it. Like, I'm not having that kind of conversation. It's not that I'm trying to hide it. If they ask, I tell them, but I don't have to try to dictate my view onto it. Like, we're there to worship, talk. We're there to speak about God, commune, and that's our purpose for being there. And so that's what I'm engaged in. That's the point of church. That's why you go. So I didn't get into philosophical conversations because it just didn't come up.
No, I see what you mean. So have you ever shared this definition with another Christian?
I do, and a lot of people don't believe stuff like that. You get different people. Depending on the people you engage with, some are open to it, some are not. Because that's the one thing you find is like why Christians go against silent. Because you hear that you have to believe, and you do. Because one thing I always like in this too, because this is another thing that I really got from jiu-jitsu. Because when I was in jiu-jitsu, like I wanted to be a world champion. Like I'm going to do this for 4 or 5 years. I won't give them all. I want to do that. And one thing you learn, if you really want to accomplish something, it requires commitment. Like you have to say, like, I'm all in. You got to be all in. And that's part of our religion is you do have to be all in. But you got to be careful about what you're all in on. And so they look at that being all in, and they think that means taking every word literally. And so, like, for them, being all in means accepting this Bible literally and everything in it, and that's what means being all in is. And so that's why I think you see that is because they think, well, that's the buy-in. Well, that part isn't. That's not the buy-in. But they think that is. And so that's where that comes from. And so I generally, when I'm talking to Christians, I'm not trying to get into these kind of conversations with like that. That's not what you're there for. That's not how you get to understanding. if people bring about it, like I'll bring it up. Like I believe in evolution. I accept science. All those things. It's like, because that's another problem. It's like, I'll buy. Like I don't get to dictate how God did things. I'm not trying to do that. There's some idea that if it can't be snapped in, materialized instantly, like that's somehow going off. I try to avoid those. Like I don't think that's a helpful way to look at it. Because that's where you get tied up in those. Like, can God accomplish anything? Well, I'll say yes. I'm not going to get into the methods. I think if you try to get into the methods, then that's where things fall apart. And I generally try to avoid that. And so I think some Christians are just not receptive to my views. They're just not.
Yeah, I think that actually is an unfortunate facet of all, well, I can't say all religions because I don't know that, but it certainly
Yeah.
crops up in Christianity. Well, look at all the ways it has fractured. To say nothing of the war, multiple wars that have happened as recently as the 1980s. But on to lighter topics. What's your take on the apologist claim that there's no such thing as an atheist, that atheists are in denial, basically?
That's crap. I mean, that's just not true. I mean, atheists are not in denial. That's just not true. I mean, I never understood that. I don't know why they say that. They're just in denial. The only thing I can, to try to be kind to that.
There's a verse in Romans.
Yeah.
There's that verse in Romans that strongly hints. It either strongly hints at it or it outright says it. It seems to say that to lack belief in Jehovah, you start by lying to yourself, and then do so. First of all, you lie to yourself because you want to sin, and then you do it so long you believe it, and then you forget what you were lying about. You take it as the truth. That's what the verse seems to be saying.
Yeah, I don't really buy that, because the only it's like when I say like God is there and present, not necessarily always obvious. I mean, if you look at something, you don't see it, you don't see it. That's not lying. You're just honesty there. I mean, atheists can be atheists. I don't quite get that, where they're going with that, or I think that's kind of silly. Like I said, when I was an atheist, like I was genuine, like I just didn't see it. Didn't see it.
Yeah.
You gotta look back and say, well, was it always sort of there? Yes and no. Like it comes from perspective. From certain perspectives, you're not going to see it. That's true from that perspective.
I will say this, Mike.
Yeah.
Of all the apologists, well, actually, you're not an apologist. Would you call yourself an apologist?
I would call myself an apologist. Like, cause
Okay. Of all the apologists
yeah,
that I've ever heard,
yeah,
not just spoken to, there's a common theme where they say, "I used to be an atheist." I think you're the first one I actually believe.
yeah. I mean, I was an atheist, and that's why
Like,
I
are you
see it as
familiar with Lee Strobel?
Lee Strowman.
He wrote The Case for Christ.
I don't think I have. The name rings a bell, but I've never really encountered his work that much.
Okay, well, he also claims he used to be an atheist, and he converted when he began applying his journalistic talents to scripture and also the archaeological evidence. And he said converted him. I do not believe him.
I look at that too. I think,
and I see that as a common theme. It's almost like to earn your bona fides as an apologist, you have to have said, and I don't mean you. I mean you.
yeah. Honestly,
People on the circuit, so to speak, have to say, "I once was lost, but now I'm found."
if you got there on archaeological evidence, I would question. You got to be careful. Like, if somebody's an atheist, and I don't think they're an atheist, that most people that are atheists in that manner. Like, if you're going, if you have the atheist, if you're like more the modern skeptical atheists, say the modern skeptical atheists, they're not out to deny it. They're just they're looking at it. Science is a good source for knowledge. They recognize human contingency and all that stuff. That's your modern skeptical atheist. I don't see how you get from that position through archaeology to God. The thing of it is
To be clear, I think he's lied.
yeah.
I don't. In fact, it's one of two things, but neither is his story as he tells it. He either has always been religious, had a crisis of faith, maybe, but that's not the same thing,
Mm.
and then got an idea for a book. Or he is an atheist, but he realizes that he had an idea for a book. And I hate to sound so cynical, but yeah, I see a lot of dishonesty, and that's another thing I wanted to cover at a
Yeah.
future junction is the dishonesty in religion as a business. Because if religion worked how it's working in your life, then we wouldn't have a problem, would we? And I mean, we as a species, because it's really hard to mess that up. Um, but that's not the case. You know it, and I know it.
No, I mean, I agree. It's that's not the case, and I think it's a certain things that if you're being honest, in religious stuff through there, it's you know I hate most apologetics out there, because the reason I hate a lot of apologetics is they'll go up there and you'll kind of use one of these Thomas Aquinas 5 ways, fine tuning, cosmological. That's not how you got to the faith. It's not, and so that's why you sort of got to be honest with that about that. It's like, if you want to stand from a third person perspective, you're not going to see God. You're not going to find it. That's not where you see it. That's why I tell people, if you want an argument for God, I can have a conversation. You're not going to get there by premise, conclusion. That's not how it is. It's not the way you're going to see it. That's why I tell people it's a perspective. Because again, the one thing that a quote that the Anselm of the fame of the ontological argument. There's actually something he said that really stuck with me. He sort of said.
Please remind me of it. Which one is the ontological argument? Is
That's the one.
You can conceive of it, therefore it's
yeah.
real?
I have a being so great of which no greater can be conceived. The only way that being could be better if it actually existed.
I think
That's
that
the
might possibly
rough one.
be the weakest argument for God.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of weird. Oddly enough, in S5 modal logic, that works. It's a very unique argument, but he actually says something different. He sort of said, I don't. He says, I believe in order to stand. I don't. It's basically, I think I'm going to screw the quote up, but the general line is, I believe in order to understand. I don't believe because I understand. And that's, if you're going to be a religious person, you sort of have to accept that. It's a truth you get through living. You have to sort of acknowledge that from the outside looking in, there's going to be things about that just look silly. They just do, But so like, to understand it requires a commitment. So I don't fault anybody saying, like, I don't want to commit because looking at it through there. I've been there. I understand that point. And the thing is, there's not going to be a lot. I think, a case be made where religion's rational. I think you can find things that point to it. But as far as you're going to prove it like a scientific theory, well, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get there like that. Do we reach a point where that we can do that? I don't think it's impossible. But
That would be a good segue into another question I wanted
yeah,
to ask you. And then I really do have to go.
yeah,
I think it's a wonderful sign that we've gone this far over.
yeah, yeah.
Why do you think the Kalam argument gets the press that it does when personally, I think it's very flawed on at least 3 points. But why do people like Dr. William Lane Craig propose it as if it's a groundbreaker, or like they're heavy hitter, so to speak.
Well, I mean, the actual the actual argument itself's not bad. It doesn't. I look at it, doesn't get you anywhere. So if you sort of like, well, everything that that begins to exist have a cause. Okay, that's fine. The universe began to exist. Okay, that's sure. Then the universe has a cause. Well, great. I don't look at the argument as that structure is fine, but what does it tell you? It really tells you nothing. Okay, so you're going to call that cause God. Great. Okay, that's God. Now you can know.
Point I was going to bring
You can
up.
know.
The jump between there must be a cause to that cause has to be a conscious entity, and I happen to know who it is.
That's where it falls apart.
That.
You can't get the conscious entity. There's no. Like he tries to bring that in later. Like those general 3 points are fine, but now it tells you nothing. You can assign no attributes, no purpose, no nothing. It's a cause. Doesn't tell. It could be a random. It could be anything. Okay, it's a cause. Great. And so it helps you get off the ground. But then I don't look at the first three is not the problem. It's everything after that that's the problem. So you've established something. Sure, I guess. You can say nothing about it though. You can't say anything else. He tried to smuggle in intentionality.
Yeah,
and I don't. That's where it falls apart.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to bring up. We don't know how universes start. We only have one of them.
Yeah,
and
it's
the early universe. First of all, we got a block. There's a part where we can't see past right now. We don't have the technology to do it. But time does seem to break down under those conditions. So I'm not sure that the word beginning, as we understand it, applies. In which case, cause and effect, which require a beginning and then an after and then an after, are equally inapplicable. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. You can get to where before is a meaningful statement because you can sort of from logic get a concept of before. But I look at all that talk though. It's the problem. Here's the problem I think with the Kalam is if it works, it destroys your whole religion because then like all those contradictions and why the world is all this and all that stuff starts holding. All that stuff starts holding. Like I look at that as like I don't look at like God can't possibly be that because in everything about my existence just doesn't line up there. How does any of that make sense?
How does it make sense?
Anything within the tradition or any religion whatsoever makes sense. Like the world the way it is. If you have this version of God where he can create a universe and he can create any physical laws and he can intercede at will and that's kind of model, like nothing makes sense. Like I just don't know what you do with that. I don't. And plus, you're not even working with your tradition. All that about that's just so strange. It's not how you define anything. If you try to understand something, you start with your experience of it. If I want to think something, if I think an animal exists, I start looking for tracks. I start looking for signs. I don't theorize what this animal could be and create this picture of it. I don't create a scientific theory. I view the world. I kind of see how it works, and then from that my encounter with reality, I start building theories. It's like God's the only thing that they're building that they don't at least base it from something in your life. It's like you try to dream up a concept, you try to dream up an explanatory tool, and you're not basing it from their experiences of that. The thing I don't like about Craig is that version of God doesn't come from his faith. Like it's a way to answer a riddle and a question, and
Did you say it's a way to answer a riddle with a question?
It's a way to answer a riddle and a question.
Oh.
And so you create something that can answer a question. Like, why is there something other than nothing? I just don't know what the purpose of it is. I just...
Well, it's apologetics.
It is, but that's
the name of
there's a reason nobody ever gets convinced by it. Because that's not how they believe. That's not why Craig believes.
Right.
He does not believe because of the cosmos law. That's not why he's a Christian. It's not.
Yeah.
So start with why you're a Christian. Why does it make sense to you? If it's rational, if you then why are you?
Well, I
Start
think
from your life.
I think it comes from. I'll just be honest. I think it comes from insecurity. I think arguments made like that are not about proving yourself right. They're about breaking down the other side and make it's heuristic. It's heuristic arguing.
I believe that's the case. It's that's a hard thing. The motivations. I just knew when I was 8 that I'd heard of those, and they don't work. Because here's the thing: even if you grant them, so okay, I'm going to grant at that point. Well, you still got all your work left. Okay.
Hey,
So
we
now
didn't
you,
touch on the devil, did we?
yeah. I mean, no. So you have that figure you're calling God. Well, how do you get from there to the tradition you're working with?
Mhm.
Oh, how do you ever link those? Like, how do you get from here to here? And that's another thing too. Like, I sort of wish, like I always told atheists, like, because they'll fight on the points. Just say, okay, I grant all that. I'm going to agree with you. Okay, that's God. Now get from there to your tradition. Because and that's one thing I think if you as a debate tactic, atheists do more is deal with a Craig figure. We'll say, I grant all that. Sure, we'll call that God, whatever. Okay, now get from there to Jesus Christ. How are you going to do it? How are you doing it? How are you getting from outside the
Well,
universe to inside the universe?
I
How do
think
you get there?
I think what he's counting on is popularity, and people who are. I don't want to pick
Well,
on Craig specifically, but
it's habit.
yeah,
Because we accept this common model of God, and so if you can create the label, then all this stuff will magically sort of get attached to it, and you're not going to reason for it. It's just
right.
you got this body, and now you can stick it to something,
I would
and
say
so that's
that
how it
anyone
works.
who does, pardon me,
Yeah,
I would say anyone who does argue heuristically has to take as a default setting their stance. They're counting on uh, they're vanquishing the other side means popularity, habit will take
mm.
over. And unfortunately, many times, even though it's not logically correct, many times it's practically correct. Because Craig full well knows if he can make atheism look implausible, Christianity wins by default.
It is, but there's another thing too. Like I tell people, I never get too hung up on the creation part because you got two creation stories in the Bible, and one's a poem. So why are we getting too hung on that? It's like the part of the Bible less than like I actually did the math one time on actual like space, like 0.2% of the Bible is devoted to creation. Well, that's how important it is. So why am I as a Christian that worried about it? If my tradition, it's a side note. It's a blurb. It's less. It's 2%.
It's not just about
two
percentage of
tenths
the
of a
book.
percent. It's 2/10 of the percent is about creation. Why do I care that much about creation?
Well, if
I
I
don't
commit a
care. I'm
murder,
here.
that's not going to be
I'm
much of
here.
my life, but it
Yeah.
certainly is going to be a pivotal point of my life, even if it's much less than 0.2% of my life.
I don't look at that. I mean, I'm not in religion to answer those questions. That's not what it's about. I
Now,
mean,
I agree. I just
if you're
don't
looking
think
to the
we should
Bible to explain the functioning of the world,
yeah.
we don't need to go there. We have reason and we have experiences. We have life. We were built with the capability of understanding. So let's use that. Like, well, I don't need to go there to try to answer. That's not what it's about. I don't. It doesn't
Um,
matter.
I know I keep saying this
Yeah.
is the final one. This is the final one.
Yeah.
This is now the final one.
Yeah.
Um, I've interviewed quite a few um, apologists
Yeah.
slash pastors, but I didn't publish, but got like 4 hours at least of footage.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a pattern. I would not be surprised if within 50 years' time, the majority of Christians believe as you do, as opposed to like the religion like that I was raised in, or that you were familiar with when you were growing up in Tennessee. Do you see that as a likelihood?
I do, and I think that that is, and that's an evolution that I think is going to have to occur, and it should occur. I really think so. I mean, that's the one thing, like, that's sort of good. Like religion, like everything's so documented. It's like, and that's a good thing. It makes change very, very slow, but there's importance there. You have to ground it. It's like we always have to stay linked back. That's why I'm believing in the God of Abraham, because I have to own it. If I divorce from that tradition, then I got no way to touch with that. If you're going to take certain things about God seriously, about the eternality and stuff like that, well, you got to stay in that tradition, that thread, and that's another thing. God evolves. I mean, there's an evolution. There's an element of unchangingness there, but there's also an evolution because the world changes. There's adaptability. That's part of it. That's part of life. That's part of where we're supposed to know. Like our understanding should evolve. It should change. That's a healthy and good thing. That's one of the things I think is the beauty about it is the tradition can accommodate that. I mean, that's another reason. Like I believe in the reality is because it can accommodate change. It's adaptable. I would, if I expect something real, it should be adaptable. It should be able to survive alternating conditions. I think that's one thing about Christianity. It served and it can do that. It survives. It adapts.
Let's cut it here
Okay.
as far as the recording. In wrapping up, what are your thoughts?
I like the format here. I think we all do. Some days, like I think these kind of conversations can be more productive. Is getting stuff out there. We got to get those. Get some of those out there and exchange those viewpoints. It's and I like doing these things too. Is the same token. Like I'm believing in something, and I think part about being belief is you got to challenge your own beliefs. Like if I'm buying into this, I have to be willing to step forward, say it, and let that be challenged. Because and accept the good and bad from it. It's at the end of the day, like I believe God. I can believe it can be proved, but you got to also to it like it's understanding what the purpose of religion is. It's like because you have those notions of divine hiddenness stuff like that. So that's one thing I think we should talk about and get into, like divine hiddenness and stuff like that. I think as a Christian, I have to account for that. I have to have an explanation for that. I have to make some sense of that, like why that is the case. And because part of what I'm doing with my YouTube channel, stuff like that, is like I'm trying to build a different model for God. Like the one we have, this tri-omni, it doesn't work. One thing I always want, the tri-omni model of God, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I always want to tell people, there's a difference between you having a bad model and a thing not existing. And I think I look at God as being that case. We have a bad model of God. And so it worked for an earlier time. It doesn't work now. It doesn't work. It's not that God's not there. We need a different way of understanding it. And that's part of what my project is building one and doing it from the information that I have and from the encounters from God. Embodying certain bullets.
A lot of honesty to admit that it doesn't work. I wonder why so many people just cannot latch onto that. They would rather divorce from reality. To the point of saying that I'm insincere in my, well, not a worldview, but in my stance on the God.
Honestly, I'm going to convict Christians. They've created an idol. Like the tri-omni model of God, it's an idol. In a lot of ways, it's an idol. And that was I look at like what was very remarkable about the Abrahamic faith. You didn't have an idol. It was for a Bronze Age religion to not have a representation of God. That was, every other Bronze Age religion had idols. Here's this representation of God. Well, you weren't allowed to have that. Like the closest thing, the Israelites had to an idol was the ark, and the ark contained words. You didn't have this physical manifestation. It was a very much, don't try to define God. You don't get to define God. And as soon as you're making an idol, in some ways you're defining God. And what was really unique about the Abrahamic faith is you don't get to do that. You don't get to make an idol. And I think when we created an intellectual idol. Like, I don't get to answer all the questions. So it answers questions. It lets theologians play. It's a very good thing to play with, but it's not accurate. And it doesn't work. As soon as you go back, as soon as you bring that concept back into the Bible, it falls apart. It's a logical mess.
We should address that,
Yeah.
assuming you do want to do this again, which I
Yeah,
do.
absolutely.
That mental note, let's address
Yeah.
that. Like I guess you would call it dogmatism, idolatry, dogmatism slash idolatry.
It's dogmatism / idolatry. It really is. And I kind of know, like, going out here, I'm getting a lot of pushback from Christians, and I know that, but it's necessary. Like, I look at those, like, I'm not very apologetic about it. It's like, I don't have all the answers, but I think a few things I can say. It's know what your faith's about. Don't try to pretend. It's about having truths in life and not about representing the world correctly. It's not what it's about. Don't pretend it does.
What would you think in the future about like having people write in with questions?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the way to take it. Is we build this and you let audiences come in and stuff like that. That's the best way, I think, to go with this. Is we start a conversation and try to bring other people into it. So I think that because I think that works on several fronts. Because you got to get a conversation, you want to invite people in, and because it helps direct towards the audience, and plus they'll bring up points that we're not thinking of.
Right. Yeah. I think it would also be a handy way of putting to bed some of the old arguments. Some of the old arguments. Let me finish my words. But like today, we did touch on kalam. You shot down quite a few of them. You said fine tuning. That's another one that and ontological. But yeah, things like that. I think
because there's some we'll touch on too. Is like. And we'll touch on too, like we'll have some because, of finding evidence for God. Like, I will touch on those. Like, I think you can find evidence for God out there. It's just, but you got to build it like you do every other theory. There's going to be traces. You got to start with it like that. And so I think something we can touch on later, of me making more of that positive case for it. 'Cause I think there's a case to be made, but it's going to be a different route. I think you can start trying to prove in God through those, but you can't do it with these a priori arguments. That's not how you engage anything else. That's not the way you do it. You have to be honest, and do it from here's my encounters, here's from this, here's where I'm basing ideals. You got to build the model from the ground up and not the top down.
I have an unrelated question as to language.
Go ahead.
How recognizable is Belizean English?
It's very recognizable. You just got to realize everybody here starts with Spanish first. So if English is taught in the schools. It's a former British colony. So, that's the great British model is make a colony, then make all the schools English. Is a great method the British used. And that's kind of what you have. The schools are the official language, and the schools are English. So everybody's taught English. And so it's sort of like that. It's sort of like it's the official language.
I've actually never heard Belizean English. I've heard.
It's Commonwealth English.
Damn near every other dialect. But you said it's Commonwealth English.
I call it Commonwealth English.
I got you.
The British Commonwealth.
I think I read what you mean. Does it sound British?
No, it doesn't at all. It sounds much more American, really, honest with you.
Really?
It didn't sound British at all, yeah.
That's really interesting. I find it very interesting that relatively recently, as far as linguistics is concerned, those people who learn English as a second language have shifted from, even in Europe, pardon me, from choosing a British accent to now
Did it get Americanized?
American. Yeah.
I know, it's weird. It's strange, but you're right about that. English has become Americanized. It's more of like an American dialects, accents, everything.
Yeah,
Why that is, I'm not sure, but
it's an interesting shift.
yeah.
I That's a deep interest of mine. When you were studying jiu-jitsu, did you pick up Portuguese? Pick up any
Not
Portuguese?
really, not much. Like my instructor was Samuel Braga, so he was from Brazil, and so I never picked up much though. Like I really suck at learning languages.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, it
It's a
doesn't come
passion of
easy.
mine. I love it. I
I'm just
wish,
not good at it.
yeah, I wish that
Yeah,
I had that kind of calling where I had learned at least one of the biblical languages, so that I could go back and
I'm with you on that. It's I would kind of like that too, but like man, that's hard. I
well,
I
okay.
took some Latin back in the day, but yeah,
You're not wrong. In fact, you're very
yeah,
right. I wanted to point
yeah,
this out. I forget what organization does this, but it's the organization that trains diplomats in
yeah.
learning languages, and they put them into tiers. I think officially there are five, but you can really
Yeah,
whittle it
I
down
know what you're
to
talking about. They
three.
have the levels of how hard they're to learn. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And to say nothing of the fact that these are ancient languages, but just the families that they're in, which is the Semitic and Greek uh, languages, they're tier two, where which makes them equal in difficulty to things like Slavic languages, which
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever taken a crack at. They're hard. Whereas languages like Portuguese, Spanish,
The
French
romantic are much easier. Yeah, they're level
are
one.
much easier. They're level
Yeah.
one. They're about as easy as a natural language can be to learn,
Yeah.
um, which is saying something because they're no walk in the park either. So yeah, I know what you mean. Like it's a nice idea, but good Lord, I know my limits, and I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could learn Hebrew.
Yeah.
I took a look at modern Hebrew, and it's very interesting. But sometimes you can dip your toe in something, and you're like, okay, I can see what level of commitment this will take. I know how long it will take, and that's not me. Well, that's what happened.
I'll look at it the same way too, because that's the problem too. Is like as soon as you learn the words, and like because I've looked in like some of the translations and like because then you'll learn the words and they deal with all these phrasings. Like translations is such strange. Like because I take the time to look up like you do the word for words and like holy crap,
Well, you
that still
can.
makes no sense. You can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, especially the farther the target
Oh yeah,
and goal languages are apart, the more difficult that is. But then you compound that by the length of time that is, like we're talking
oh yeah,
ancient languages. You you always need to be cognizant of culture when you do translation or learn a language at all. But that's compounded ever so much more so with an ancient language because you got to go back to a culture that no longer exists, and it's like interpreting a Bosch painting. Like he
yeah.
put so much symbolism that we have to basically guess at.
Because you
Um,
don't live in the times. There's so much plays and
yeah,
stuff there that, and and some of that stuff will always be lost. There's going to be those little contexts in terms of phrases
isn't that
that
interesting?
it's going to be
Isn't that
lost.
just so? Like
Yeah,
you could literally spend your whole life studying it. It's like, did you ever read? I know you have a with your
yeah,
minor in comparative religion. Did you ever read
yeah.
Campbell, Joseph Campbell?
I love Campbell's work. I
Yeah.
love Campbell's work, like his the hero motifs, and like I look at a lot of his stuff, and like I love some of his work through there. I think he's very insightful. The role of myths and stuff like that. Like I thought he was
Fact
Campbell's very insightful.
of this right here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because when I took Latin, we got into a lot of Campbell's stuff. We got because we know when I took Latin, we learned about mythologies and Campbell's hero cycles, those common motifs. Like I look at that's very he has some very insightful stuff. I thought.
In many ways, to me, he's like the godfather of comparative religion. At least to me, because that's how I was even introduced to the concept. Sanford University in Alabama.
Yeah, I talk about yeah.
I was an English major at Sanford, and when we had to do our very first, like, not baby research paper, but
Yeah.
like research
Yeah.
paper. My professor took me aside, and I was going to cover something mythological, and she said, "Have you read Joseph Campbell?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you're going to have to."
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
personally gave
Yeah.
me not this copy, but she gave me an earlier edition of
Yeah.
Masks of God, Occidental Mythology, and The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And she said, "You have to read this." Um, she said, "I don't see how you're going to write about mythology in a critical way without this." And I walked away. I mean, I took her advice, obviously,
Mm.
but I walked away being like, that's so authoritative, that's so dictatorial. I'm like, how dare you say I could not possibly tackle this? And then I read it and I was like, oh, wow.
Well,
I'm not
because
going
a
to
lot of
say for
ways
sure that she's
he
right,
kind of
but
he started
she
the
really
field.
did
I
give
mean,
me she gave me the keys to the kingdom.
yeah, because Campbell has some great stuff in there. Like because I remember encountering him through theirs, and that really stuck with me. And it's about stuff like that. You start realizing, that because you look at mythology and you realize, oh, these are stories, but they're conveying so much. There's so much messages in mythology. You know,
I
it,
also very much
yeah,
liked Robert Graves. Um, oh, oh man, she defined Greek mythology for me. It's the most, is it Edith Hamilton?
Hamilton. Yeah, I ain't
I'm
talking
drawing
about
a
Hamilton.
blank.
Yeah, no, he if
Edith
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Yeah,
Is it?
the Hamilton rings a bell. I know you're talking about, but it's been a while for
Yeah.
me. But Edith
Yeah.
Hamilton, that rings a bell.
Yeah. I wonder, I hope I'm not getting her name wrong, but um, she singled out the Greeks. She said that they humanized their gods in a way that people weren't doing at the time. And I thought that was really fascinating. Um, because Greek myths have always been my favorite. They're very relatable. Um, there's just a lot of interesting stuff happening. They work as entertaining stories, whereas a lot of other mythologies to me don't. They're
No,
very,
that's true. That's true.
they're very strange. Like, well, uh, I'm trying to think of an example other than Jehovah, but like Jehovah, like that, there's not a lot of struggle there. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when Zeus fights Typhon, that's a struggle. And that shows like, oh, wow, I admire this guy. He came back from defeat. But with Jehovah, he's always in control. And even Satan is not written. Like, even if you take Satan literally, which is yet another thing I wanted to ask you about in our next meeting. But he's never presented as a threat, not to Jehovah.
No, no,
Whereas
it's
you
not
have in
his role. Like,
Zoroastrianism, you have an Ajidahaka,
yeah,
which
because I
is
mean, and
which
that's
is
sort of
a
weird
threat.
development, and it's kind of that that unique development. Like the role of Satan changes, like Satan
Yeah,
from the
and that's also
and
very telling, I think, because in many ways it's very strange because we didn't get into this, but Christianity is in almost every measurable way a completely different religion than um, Judaism or early Judaism. In other words, that which is laid down in the Old Testament. The New Testament and Old Testament are almost diametrically opposed. In fact, I think you could be fair in saying that they are, because, and I'm just talking words on page. If you read words on page, things like the Beatitudes, the Golden Rule, um, that which you do to the least of my brethren. I mean, almost every word out of Jesus's mouth. Like, whoever is, what did he say? Whoever is such and such is my mother, my brother, my daughter, my. Anyway, he was very much into equality, very much into not making war with people. Whereas Old Testament, not. Almost the complete opposite. Very brutal, dictatorial, dehumanizing when it comes to women and children, and on and on and on. So it's very strange. But at the same time, one relies on the other.
And it does,
Very
because
dedicated.
we'll get into that, because, because that really plays into religion's about living, and so it's about answering questions. It's because the Jewish context was how to have a society. How do you, in a Bronze Age world, what do you have to do to exist as a people? And the later question about Jesus is, well, how does the individual exist? So basically, I look at a lot of the changes is it's Christianity is the question of the individual, because what you sort of like because one thing the Roman Empire had is now you have a stable world.
Now you have to what?
You have a stable world,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
the Romans did, because
That
if you,
I think of
yeah.
all the empires that have ever existed that committed conquest, I think the Romans were probably the best ones to live under because didn't they allow you to live under your own laws?
Oh yeah, your own laws, your
And
own faiths. Yeah,
yeah, all you had to do was pay them taxes, right?
you paid them taxes, and there would be periods where they would sort of ask for you to burn an incense toward the emperor, because most people are polytheistic, so they did have
It was
certain.
basically mercantilism, right?
Pretty much, it was a system, and so they wanted loyalty of troops, and you had you sort of had a token, except the religious guys, except the emperor. Like, that was the one thing. Like, and they were very forgiving. Like the Jews, they didn't make them. They didn't make the Jews offer any kind of sacrifice or incense toward the emperor. So they kind of let them be. It's like, we'll give you an exception, because they were more concerned about just keeping the empire together, and so they were very pragmatic. Keep your faith, religions, like whatever, accept ours. But you
Keep your house
crazy,
clean.
yeah, you
Don't bother
crazy
us.
You crazy Jewish zealots. We'll make an exception for you, and we'll say it because you're ancient. That's it. We can say it with a straight face. Oh, your religion is very ancient, so we'll let you slide. You know,
What inspired the Sicarii? Like, why did they want to kill Romans? Or is it just because not being autonomous is not being autonomous, and that's worth fighting for?
I mean, it's one thing about the Jews. I kind of look at it. I always say it's, you know, it was, how do we exist as a society? And so, you get these rules. Here's how you exist as a society. If you want to stay together as a people, the Jews are kind of unique. They're a Bronze Age society, ethnic group that still exists. That's
Hmm.
pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It
Like,
is, actually.
they're the only ones. I cannot think of another one that, okay, they existed as a group from the Bronze Age, and they're still around as a distinct ethnic group.
Yeah, it's actually very fascinating.
But it's like the price you pay for that is all those years of persecution. It's like, if you don't want to assimilate, here's how you stick together. Here's these customs, these habits. They're
Let's,
strange, but if you practice them,
to be fair, many of the places that they lived, they couldn't assimilate. Like Jews in Europe, for instance,
yeah.
faced centuries of oppression, and
Oh yeah,
so I mean, the word ghetto literally
comes from Jews.
describes.
Yep,
Yeah,
it's a Jewish segregation. That's what a ghetto is. It was
right,
that population.
exactly. During the Black Death, they were blamed for it,
Yeah,
which explained that to me. Not literally, but I mean,
it's middle age thinking. It's just, you have some of that.
it. Yeah, that. Yeah, but
Yeah,
Mike, this was
absolutely,
way funner than I
absolutely.
expected it to be.
Yeah, worked out good. So we'll get our things sent over to you, and I'll have Harvey send an unedited version. Then, if you want, you can have him edit how you
Yeah,
like.
please. Do you still
Just
roll?
not much. I've had 8 surgeries. I've had 3 ACLs, 3 meniscus,
Woo!
2 tricep tendons,
Please
and
don't tell me that
so.
was of jujitsu.
Well, I was very, very much, like I said, I was a massive competitor. So I pushed my body to the limit, and it broke. So I knew that going out. I said, I'm going to push till I break, and when I break, I'll stop. So I just
See, I
broke a
want
lot.
to. I'll tell you, I want to do it my whole life. I've fallen in love with it,
Yeah.
but I don't want to break. I
No,
mean, I only got
well,
one meet.
you won't. If you go in there and you take it slow, you're fine. But me, like I said, I was trying to be a world champion, so I was pushing it. And so the problem was I developed that mindset. I could never get out of that mindset. And so I went from, when I stopped competing, I would train the competitors. And so I never stopped rolling competitively. And my problem was I got into it with that mindset, and I never could get out of that mindset. And so, plus I'm in Belize and there's nowhere to train. That's what really happened. I never
That
stopped.
was going to be a question of mine. Like,
There's not.
that's a small place.
There's a couple. The closest gym's an hour and a half away. Like I'm eventually going to move closer there so I can train, but it's just I'm so far away. Like I love doing it. I would love to still do it. I'm just lack of things. Plus, at this point I'm a little reluctant because I've had so many injuries, and every time I get rolling, I push it up and end up breaking something.
A follow-up question to that.
Yeah,
Now that I got my first stripe, they allow you to do more in the gym,
yeah,
such as actually roll with people as opposed to just
yeah,
drilling. And I asked a friend of mine who's a purple belt, and I'm
yeah,
basically asking every higher belt that I can bend
yeah.
the ear of. One main thing that I want to use this for is self-defense. And
Just
so what I was thinking of,
yeah,
and
you're good.
you're already shaking your head.
I said after a year, you're good. I said after a year,
Oh,
you
okay.
don't have to. I mean,
Well,
honestly, like
let me finish
if
my
you,
let me,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, let me finish my question real quick. So what I wanted to do is there are two
Yeah,
no gi classes
yeah,
that I can feasibly attend, and I wanted to per week, and I wanted to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday split.
yeah.
Wednesday and Friday being the no gi classes, because I'm thinking that no gi lends itself better to self-defense since I don't think the guy attacking me will be wearing a gi.
You probably get a little bit across, but honestly, like if you go train spar for a year, you'll realize it's just the fact that you're comfortable with somebody coming at you with 100% intensity, and you get used to just basically having physical contact, and you're just fine. Like just going through that for a year, you can beat pretty much about anybody because you're comfortable with intensity, you're comfortable with contact, and you realize most people just don't know shit. It's really easy. It really
It's
is.
funny. I asked a brown belt
Yeah,
guy who's in the army, and he's
yeah,
freaking enormous, and he said pretty much the same thing you just said, with a smile on
oh
his
yeah.
face. But it's so hard for that to sink into my head that's possible. But I mean, what you're saying, it feasibly makes sense. I totally understand what you're saying. I guess it's just
Because here's what'll happen: like train for a year, then when you'll get new people that come in and try classes, and you'll get somebody that will go out in there and be 100% all out like it's a fight, and you realize well how easy they are to control. You're like, whoa, they're just spazzing. Like, geez, guy, like what are you doing? You just move around them, and those guys are the easiest ones to beat because they're so out of control, and it's just easy. And honestly, like, here's the thing I tell people is like, you'll learn it and you're so comfortable being physical, you'll never get into a fight because fights start with being egos. And somebody will sense like, oh, they're getting ready for a fight and you just don't really care. You're like, I can fight you. I fight all the time. I do this all the time. And you're
yeah.
just so calm. And that calmness will prevent fights. Like I never get into fights just because I don't care. I'm calm.
Yeah, I've heard of that effect.
Yeah.
A lot of it is two people with something to prove. Neither
Yep.
wants to back down.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody
It's
says
most
something
fights.
that they can't take back.
Yep. And
I've heard
if
that a lot
you,
of people get shot. I don't know if you've ever served in the military
yeah.
or law enforcement or
No,
anything,
I
but
never have.
yeah, I haven't either. But I used to sell orthopedic supplies to vets.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's in
Yeah.
no way comparable. I don't know why that jumped into my head. I have heard, although I forget where the source is, which irks me, that a lot of people get shot from saying, "I know you won't shoot me."
I can believe that. Well, because now you're daring them. Now you made it an issue. You put it out there. You drew a line to sand. You don't want to draw lines.
it's
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how the more things change, the more
Yeah.
things stay the same.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
said you said you're 48, right? So you
Yeah.
grew up in the 70s and the 80s, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And I did too. I grew up in the 80s, and it's funny, like the way guys start fights when I was a kid, and then I would hear my parent, like my dad specifically, talk about how people started fighting in the 60s.
Oh,
It's the
same
same
shit.
thing.
Yeah.
Like
Same
I
thing.
said, it's two people, neither one wants to back down. Like I said
Guys,
before,
gotta save
and
face.
I bet, the same thing happens. I mean, what heck, there's a bar near where you are because that's where you called me from yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen.
Oh yeah. But like I say, yeah, it's sort of like I'm a bigger guy, but I've never really had people mess with me. But same deal, like it just doesn't rise to me. Like I see people, cause
Oh yeah,
I've done it
no.
for I've done it for
Of course,
so
Maddie likes
long.
it.
Yeah, I've done it for so long. Like I walk in, like I know I can win a fight, so I got nothing to prove, and
Yeah.
I just don't care. Like people can talk, like say what you're going to say. You're not going to do anything. If you're going to do something, you're going to stop talking. If you
I
start
remember.
talking, I don't worry about you.
I remember.
Yeah.
Oh God, who was it that was talking? I know you know who Chuck Liddell is.
Oh yeah. Oh, go check the Yep.
Um, I forget who it was that, but they're like, I've seen Chuck Liddell just hanging out, and people will actually mess with him. They like go, and it. I'm, I guess it's trophy hunting, or some
I
variation of
guess
it.
I don't even know why you do that. Like you're just if you walk out of that situation, that's because they let you. I mean, people they just don't get it. A guy like a
Dude,
professional fighter like that, if you survive, it's because they allowed it, and that's just the reality. If
I
you
saw
walk
a
out
guy.
alive, they just didn't want to kill you.
I saw, I saw
Yeah.
this on video. This drunk guy, insisting, but he actually got physical with Matt Sarah, and
Oh
Sarah,
yeah, yeah. Took him down, mounted him, held him down. It's like a little kid. I saw that video too. Yeah,
yeah, he just
that's
took him
pretty much how it
down
works.
until he tired out. He
Yeah,
didn't hurt
that's
him.
pretty much how it works.
Yeah. Um, which, if you ever hear Matt Sarah talk, you wouldn't think that he had restraint.
No, he's that New York guy. He's got New York kind of vibe.
Yeah,
He got a
exactly.
little attitude. It's
Um,
different.
my
It's kind of different.
my
That New York Italian.
by the way,
Yeah,
my wife's from Queens,
yeah,
and she heard him talk,
yeah,
and she's like, "That dude's from upstate. Who's he
yep,
fooling? That man has never." What did she say? No, wait.
yeah.
Or was it the opposite? He said he's from upstate, but from his accent, she's like, "Who does he think he's fooling? He's not upstate. I hear that accent. That man has never seen a tree. That man has never seen a tree." She had me cracking up. By the way,
Uh,
the pair of fights between
yeah.
Sarah and GSP were just spectacular. I consider that the golden age of
I did too.
MMA.
That was too. Like later on, it got too many rules, too homogenized, and that was kind of when I started got off. When pride
I've
went
noticed a lot of
down.
ego eking its way in, where, but let me not be a complainer. Uh,
Yeah,
like my favorite was Anderson Silva. Like
yeah.
seeing him perform was amazing to me.
No, he was. I mean, he was unbelievable at the time. I mean, he was unbelievable. His prime, unbelievable. Absolutely
I re-
unbelievable.
like I was actually fortunate enough to watch his career as it
Mm,
happened. Like
yeah,
I didn't know about UFC or MMA
yeah,
during the Gracie years. I had to find that out later. So I
yeah.
watched it after the fact. But and oddly enough, it was my wife who got me into it. And yeah, after watching UFC like 1 through 4, we started watching it as they occurred. So we got to see,
Mm.
like GSP, Matt Serra, BJ Penn. Who else was real big? Anderson Silva, of course. Rich Franklin, Arthur
Yeah, I remember
Arlovsky.
Franklin back then. Yeah, Franklin back in the day. Yeah, I remember Franklin. That's a while back, Franklin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, oh yeah, Frank Mir. Yeah, I liked him. He was a very. But I tell you, who had personality is
Uh,
oh, Forrest Griffin.
Yeah, Griffin did. That's a big one. Griffin, he's a pretty good guy. He got a lot better than I ever thought he would be. Like I never thought he would do that well, and he really actually became a very well-rounded fighter. I mean, he really did.
He his fight with Stephen Bonner, I
Yeah.
think it deserves its hype. I
Oh, it
did
does. I
not
mean,
see that as it happened, but I saw it after the fact in one of those countdowns that
yeah.
they would do, and it was their number one pick, and I watched it, and I was like,
Oh, that
"Holy
was a
smokes!"
war. Him and Bonner. That was
Read,
a war.
yeah, you only read about, or this is like movie. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's
Yeah.
the stuff of movies. Um, but yeah, it's great. How when did you get into it? I know you told me what got you into it, but when did you get into it?
Like my first time I was through college when I was about 18, 19, I was doing some judo at the time. That's when the first UFCs came out.
What
And so
year?
like,
What year are we talking about?
that would have been, God, late 90s. Like
Late 90s. Wow, you got in on the ground floor.
I did. Then I was out of the sport for about 10 years. And then I got back into it. So I got in. I was on the ground floor. Like I was there. I was training when the first UFCs came out. I was like, oh my God. And everybody trying to find anybody that did jiu-jitsu. Like I was there at that level. Then I was out for 10 years. Then I got back into it.
You know, as soon, like I said, as soon
Yeah.
as I saw um, Hoist
Yeah.
submit chemo, I thought, oh, this is legit. And I thought, man, I want to be able to do that. But here's the problem. I was a smoker for 20 years, which is something we, talked
Yeah.
about yesterday. And I was like, I know me doing this, there's no way I'm doing that. Um, and I couldn't quit. And so I was like, man, that thing is just outrageous. I was telling you yesterday,
Yeah.
you don't need a supernatural influence to quit smoking. You just need to know that there's something you definitely must do, and it's in the way, so it's got to go.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things. I was like, I not only want to do that because I just got to know how it feels. It's I want it for safety, and so smoking is making me unsafe. That's the logical conclusion. So that I'm not going to say that was the thing that pushed me over the edge, but it was certainly a contributing factor. The other thing is, I was nearing 40. No, I was 40. I was already in my 40s, and I thought,
Yeah.
wait a minute, how much more, how much longer do you think you have?
Yeah.
Talking to myself, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how much longer do you think you have
Clock,
before you keep making
the clock starts ticking. You start really feeling the time. You're on the
say
back
again?
side of it.
Say again?
You're starting to go on the back side of it. Time becomes more important. The same deal with me. Like time's more important. You got plenty
Yeah,
left, but now it's more
absolutely.
precious.
I remember
Yeah.
I made kind of a morbid
Yeah.
joke to my sister-in-law when I turned 35 or 36, excuse me, 36. I referred to myself as middle-aged. Now here's the thing, she's 2 years older than me,
Yeah.
so she didn't like that. And then I doubled down by saying, excuse me, I meant I'm middle-aged if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
And she didn't like that either. Middle-aged humor, gotta love it. Because it's true.
That's true.
Twice 36 is 72, and that's
It's when you're starting to get where it's everything after that's a maybe.
yeah. Which I mean, I
Yeah.
don't. Uh, I've been very fortunate, and it seems like you've been very fortunate. I can tell you don't
Yeah.
have any major health problems.
Been lucky so far.
Yeah, lucky so far. There you go.
Yeah.
Um, so it doesn't bother me the way it bothers other people. It's just interesting. It's very interesting. I tell me if you've ever heard this one. Uh, as I said, I was an English major, and I remember being told as a very young person, God, I must have been a sophomore, that you have to, shoot, you won't fully understand Hamlet until you reach at least 40 years of age. You ever heard this one?
I never heard that one, but I can understand where they're coming from, though.
You cut out for a second.
I haven't heard that, but I can understand where they're coming from on that.
Yeah, and I
You
thought
know?
at first, of course, I was a
Yeah.
very confrontational person back
Yeah.
then. And so I thought, That's very limiting. I bet there are people walking around, possibly me, who could fully understand Hamlet. Yeah, I don't think you have to be 40, but harking back to what you said about experiential knowledge, I think this is bread and butter right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can textually understand Hamlet, but now having entered my 40s fully, both feet, swimming in the deep end, yeah, Hamlet hits you. You know,
Well, because now there's parts that can connect to your life. Before you didn't have life parts to connect to it. And some of that literature, now you have parts of your life that you connect to it. And
right,
that's why I look at some literature.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Things like, well, I look back on things like the draft, um, which I never experienced, of course. I don't think either one of us did,
No.
but my father certainly did, and his father too, because they happened to be born during those times, World War II and Vietnam, respectively. And looking back now, like as an older person, and having taught school also, like seeing multiple young people how they live, how very little they know of life, the draft hits differently. And I don't want to get into detail, but I think you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
I sense more of the gravity of it, I think is a way to say it. So it's things like that. Um, it's interesting. It's really interesting, and I feel very fortunate to have lived this long. Did that ever happen to you?
For the connecting back point, I've had that as I got older, is there's I'm kind of with you. Like I was sort of young and arrogant a little bit. Like, as I got older, then I started kind of realizing certain things. Like there's certain things that I've only been able to learn because I've lived through them. Like there's certain things like until you've had certain life experiences, you can't understand because you just don't have the context to understand them. And so I'm sort of in that stage of life now that I'm starting to get some of those contexts. And even like some stuff like religion. It's like I couldn't have done it younger. It's only the fact of having lived through life experiences that I can start connecting to some of those themes and stories. They make more sense now.
Pardon me. Yeah.
Because I've had those losses and gains and some of those, and now I can understand them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that way that um, we learn a lot from loss, um, which I mean nobody wants it, but it's kind of strange because it is a major growth factor. It's something. It almost seems paradoxical. I'm not sure if that would qualify as a paradox, but I don't think it does it? But it seems paradoxical on its face that this thing that you avoid is actually beneficial.
Oh,
But
I mean, that's growth. Loss is, you get growth from loss. I mean, and loss can end up, a lot of terms like it helps end up defining your life. Loss force you to think, put things in perspective. That's one thing I loved about doing jiu-jitsu the way I did it. Like I was trying to win and, I was trying to win a world championship. I didn't quite make it. And so now you got to deal with this life. I've dedicated my life to something I didn't get. Was it a waste? You got to deal with those kind of questions. Huh?
hell no, right?
No, it's not. But, it helps
I
you
mean,
deal with that.
you attained a black belt,
Yeah.
and that's something. How many people can say?
It's a small percentage. They did a math. It's a very small percentage of people who start ever
Very.
last. There's not many people last. And it's kind of a cool thing. It's like, that's one thing I still love about jiu-jitsu. When people get their black belts, it means something. These are guys, spend 10 years or no matter what, you paid a high price, be there either time or effort. You can get them quicker, but that's a lot of effort you're doing to get them there too.
Yeah, well, I'm not in a hurry,
Yeah.
but here's a question.
Yeah.
Is it physically feasible? I won't say possible. Is it feasible for me to get a coral belt?
Oh, it comes into time. Trying to do the math.
Yeah, I
Because
think
the problem when you get your black belt, you got to wait so many years. Now it's like,
yeah,
as soon as you get your black belt, everything else is honorary. You got to do in time. I want to say, I think it's about 40 years. So I think it's possible. It's
It's
possible.
something crazy like that. But the
Yeah.
whole reason I want to do it is just
Yeah.
I love snakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kid you not? That
You
is
get a free
honestly
steak?
the reason I want to have a coral belt just to say, and I do believe that is why it's called that. I think it's named
Yeah.
after the snake. Is that
Yeah.
isn't it?
I forget. I never looked into the history of that. I don't know
Yeah.
why they named it on that, but it just. I think it takes about 40 years. It's a very long time. I got to do the math because I know it's like 2 years, 3 years, and 5. It takes a long time.
I would be in my 80s.
Yeah, pretty much. You're going to be in your 80s if you get it. But I think
Yeah.
it's possible, so you can hold out.
Oh,
I think
thank
you
you.
got a shot. You got a shot.
Okay.
Yep.
One last thing that I want
Yep.
to, especially as a
Okay.
philosopher. Yes,
Yep. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you this.
Uh,
I've been asking a lot of people this lately, but you're the first philosopher I've been able to ask.
yeah.
What happens when Pinocchio says this statement? My nose will now grow.
My nose will now grow.
Now, as a literature person, I have my own take on it, but I want to ask a philosopher.
Honestly, that gets into the liar's paradox, and you go to
Yeah,
Tarski's
it
T
is.
level and
It
meta
absolutely.
language.
Yeah.
It's really all that is. Is like I don't think too much about those. It's all that ties into the Tarski T theory, Goebbels incompleteness theorem, all that. There's always going to be something in language. If you have a language system, there's going to be a contradiction. Because anytime you have self-reference, you lead to contradictions. It's an inescapable thing. That's why at a certain point, you always got to go beyond your apparatus to reach truth. That's another reason I got more applicable to religion is you hear things like Tarski's T theories, Goebbels incompleteness theorems. Whatever apparatus you use to engage the world, it's going to break down at some point. It's going to break down.
Yeah, I would say
There's going to be something that's true or something you can't deal with.
yeah. Now, as a literature person, I think
Yeah.
that would be a great way for him to break the curse.
My nose will not grow. I guess technically that wouldn't be a lie. That statement wouldn't be. The existential condition might be. That'd be an interesting one. You could probably say it without it growing. Depends on your reference frame. See, now you get into contexts. I have no idea how to answer that one, to be honest with you.
I wonder. It also reminds me of the Hangman's Paradox. Remember that one where
Yeah.
the judge tells him it's going to be a surprise,
Yeah.
and he reasons his way into thinking that he won't be hanged, only to find out he'll be hanged in the morning. Which in turn reminds me of did you ever see that James Bond film, The Living Daylights?
I have at one point, but I can't try to remember which one it is. I've seen them all at one point or the other.
Timothy Dalton, his first.
Dalton, that's the worst one. Dalton was a dead zone of Bond.
He's not everybody's cup of tea, but there's a point where he's taken hostage,
Yeah.
and when they're putting him in the cell, they tell the guy next to him, they say, Ahmed, I have good news. You will not be hung in the morning. You will be shot. When he bangs his hand,
Should do it.
because he's holding the bars.
Yeah.
He takes his billy club and bangs the guy's hands. That wanton cruelty and twist of words stayed with me. It reminds me of the Hangman's Paradox. What's another fun one? When you studied philosophy, did you specialize?
I didn't, because I basically got my undergrad, and you'll start doing specialty like post-grad and onward. So basically, you'll go through grad school, and then people start specializing. And so, I went through enough, so I know how to do it, and all the major movements and all that, and I know how to read the literature, but I never specialized. Post that, what I do the most of is I'll do philosophy of religion the most. Philosophy of science is one of my favorite ones. I read a lot in those, and I'll get some of the postmodern stuff like that. Because really, how I do philosophy is, it's you always read secondary literature first. Then when you find something good, then you go to primary. Because some philosophers are damn near impossible to read. I mean, you get people like Hegel and Kant, they're almost impossible to understand.
I've
It's
heard the
so
names, but
hard.
I never read them.
Oh my God! Don't bother. Read secondary
I,
sources.
I well, I actually have claimed nihilism for quite a while, but not in the fatalistic way.
Yeah,
Um, sort of more of a, and I'm playing fast and easy with the term,
yeah.
but I call myself a Turgenev nihilist, if that makes any sense.
Turkendif. Had to give me the reference.
I'm sorry.
You have to fill in the reference there. So what's that?
Oh,
Turkendif?
Ivan Turgenev was the Russian author. He wrote Fathers and Sons, and in
Okay.
it, um, okay, it's these two kids, excuse me,
Yeah.
this kid visiting his father, come home
Yeah.
from college. And he brings his friend with him, a man named Basarov, who's a college student. And Basarov has gotten his son into this new movement called nihilism. And how Basarov defines nihilism is that all prior philosophies are endless rhetoric, and they don't amount to anything, and they need to be done away with, and we need to come up with a new way of understanding the world based entirely on nature. And uh, he abandons this later on in the story when he falls in love,
Yeah.
because that's how the story has to go. That's
Yeah.
what happens to young men. But playing fast and easy with the rule. That's what I say. I think that philosophies they don't lead to answers; they just lead to more questions.
No, I mean it's the
And
nature of it.
yeah, you remember
You,
you were talking earlier about
yeah.
being pedantic, and what you
Yeah.
did close the door on. I said that was a breath of fresh air. I forget what I said, but
Yeah.
because most of the time that I speak philosophy or debate philosophy with people, or even discuss philosophy with people, that's what it gets lost in is endless rhetoric, because they weaponize it, for lack of a better term, try to use it in order to.
It can be, but that's get outside the realm. But it's like if you really get into philosophy and practice, like people don't do that. It's one of those. It's like people get introduced to a little bit and they get really pedantic. Then you get into it further, and everybody stops. Like nobody in philosophy thinks like that. It's like okay, yeah, let's do some real work. Let's get down to do some real work. That's what it comes down to. It's like yeah, sure,
And you remember when I brought up pantheist or
yeah,
pantheism, and you said you don't like the term because it comes with baggage. Um, and that's what I'm talking about. I
yeah,
think that ists and isms come with baggage, and that's another reason why
yeah,
if I'm going to adopt an ist, it's going to have to be nihilist, because I'm not going to commit. Like if someone were to say, "Oh, so you're a pistonist," or
yeah,
"Oh, so you follow epistemology or ontology, tautology," da 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 da.
yeah.
No. I just like you said, doing real work, taking what works, leaving what doesn't, and honestly, good faith. I think that in most of the discussions on religion that I've heard, specifically on YouTube, but even in my own life, because I've been talking about this to anyone who listen, and there's no shortage here in Alabama. A lot of bad faith arguments. Like I said, heuristic arguments, logical fallacies, character assassination. So today was a breath of fresh air. That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Which is why,
Yeah.
like what I told you,
Yeah.
in accepting your invitation, I said, it's not a debate. Let's have a discussion slash interview, because that's how I see these, and I think that's the most productive way of doing them, honestly. Like when I interviewed a Church of Christ pastor,
Yeah.
and I interviewed a Catholic minister, a Catholic youth minister,
Yeah.
and that's how I framed it. I said, I want to talk to you about ideas. I have a list of questions, but if we deviate, I'm fine with that too. Speaking of which, one thing I asked them about, and it's the thing that got me into wanting to do this. You know how I told you, I think it was yesterday. I'm not sure I'm trying to accomplish a specific goal. It's like the man who wants to run a marathon, and you said
Yeah.
same with you. Um, the thing that even got me into this is I watched. an apologist from Southern California by the name of Sean McDowell. Are you familiar with him?
I've heard the name, yeah. I've heard the name. Trying to picture his arguments, but I know the name.
Well, one thing he does is he calls it the atheist experience. And what he does is he brings a pair of glasses up on the stage with him, and he's addressing a group of students, young students, and he says, "These are my atheist glasses." Now, in a second, when I put them on, I'm going to assume a character, the character of a philosophy professor from UCLA. And my character is an atheist. And I want each of you to ask me whatever questions you would ask an atheist, and I will answer in character. And then he does so. He proceeds to do so, and then he takes the glasses off. He says, "Okay, now let's talk about what we discussed." And this, of course, he's put it on the net, and a lot of prominent atheists had a problem with it. They said it was dishonest. Now, I've worked, when I was in college, I worked as a substitute teacher and afterward
Mm.
for a total of about 9 years. Like for a while, that was my main profession. And I've also taught English as a second language online. But anyway, I've taught young people for a while. And I don't have a problem personally with what Sean is doing because he's engaging them in a safe way where he's in control. Whereas if he brought in a real atheist, as these other people have suggested he do, then he's not in complete control. So I understand. I think that's why he does it. But my problem is that he admits to lying while in character, and I think that's
Yeah, I'm going to look that up. I'm kind of curious now, but because that's one of those things you could do. Okay, but anytime you do something like that, where I haven't really adopted that viewpoint. I'm going to deal with those. I think you got to be very careful with those. If you try to present like, oh, I'm giving an accurate representation. I'm always stuff like that makes me uneasy. Like maybe you can do that where
the
it's
the ethics
okay.
the ethics of
Yeah,
representing a group you're not a member of.
yeah,
Right, there's that. At the same time,
maybe
every debate prep involves that.
it does.
So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I look at something like that and it's like maybe you can do that right. That gets very gray. I mean, I think most people who do that are they're going to try to create a caricature they can defeat. So I'm going to
yeah,
create this caricature that
right.
I know how to respond to, and so
Yeah,
I'm going to give the
that is
illusion like,
another.
oh,
Yeah, that's another
I've
problem.
considered because you're putting out like I call that playing rationality. I'm going to show you how rational I am because I've considered everything the other side has to say, and they just happen to be wrong. Like I get them. It's not a bad tactic, but I look at that as like I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah,
It's one thing to say like here's some common arguments. I'm going to address them, and they're not there. That's fine. I think you can do that in a respectful way. I'm going to answer questions that are not there, but be honest. Say, look, I'm not saying I'm right, but this is what I feel they're asking.
hmm.
I think you could do that kind of thing in a good way, but
Do you think? Do you think somebody's that? Do you think someone in
yeah.
Sean's position would actually ever bring in an atheist philosophy professor and do an interview that way?
I'd honestly doubt they would do that because that can get kind of scary for some people. I mean, if they're honest, they should.
Wait,
If
you're
you're
saying
going,
if they're honest, they should or
they
should not?
should. I mean, you should. I mean, if you're honest, you should look to have your beliefs challenged. Like, answer the questions. Like, bring in somebody that disagrees and see where your blind spots are.
Yeah,
I mean,
I actually, I actually have asked. I reached out
yeah,
to several churches, like
yeah,
let's set something up. I want to have a productive debate because I'm fascinated with
yeah,
where is religion now. I haven't been
yeah,
in. I lost my faith when I was in my early 20s,
yeah,
so I have not been inside a church. My view of religion has been nothing but YouTube apologetics, and I know that is not accurate to what's happening on the ground. That's just YouTube apologetics. That's I think more than half entertainment. Wouldn't you say?
I think some of it is, but I look at some of those apologetics and, like, I sort of, I sympathize kind of with what they're doing because, we're not, the age is not, we're moving to a period where, especially online, it's kind of hostile to religion. But I think what some of the apologetics miss is, well, they're part of the reason it's hostile. Because, well, well, I say that is, well, that's not why you believe. Say why
Oh,
you believe.
like going back to yeah, like going back to
It's
Craig.
like, okay,
Yeah,
you're a Christian. Why are you a Christian? And so the
right.
reasons they're giving, like, I'm not saying nobody never came to the faith because of the first cause argument or intelligent design. I'm sure maybe some people that's true. I don't think it's very many people. I've met enough Christians. So that's not why they believe. No, it's not why they're Christian. So if you're a Christian, just say why you're a Christian. Like,
Right. Everyone
if,
I've
if you
sorry.
think it's rational, well, say why you think it's rational. But like these arguments, that's not why they're Christian. So why are you presenting that as your argument? Why are you a Christian?
No
Say
one
that.
I've sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
No one I've spoken to has given that type of reason, like a well, I'll just say that type of reason.
Yeah.
Everyone has said something akin to what you said, which is it added something necessary to their life. Um, and yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it yeah, I can't state it better than that. It added something to their life. It was spiritual nourishment, I guess, is a way to say it. Would that be accurate?
I think it's a good way because, again, like, and that's where I think religious people have to admit it. Like, there's certain things about it, and that's what they get into. It's you're not there because of a proof. That's not what got you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah,
Would you
that's
say?
not what got you there. And
Yeah.
so don't, and so there could be a logical basis for it, and I think there's logic to it, but
Yeah.
you're much better off, of how you got to it, why that is, and I think there's plenty of reasons that be a believer and have it be rational, but these arguments that people come up with, they don't get you there. It doesn't work. It's just not. It's not. So what it's about. So don't pretend it is.
No, quid pro quo. Um, taking them at their word.
Yeah.
They also are many of the mindset that science is what deconverts people, which is the numbers do not bear that out. Most people do not lose their faith because of
No.
the theory of evolution or the Big Bang. Most people lose their faith from the number one reason is reading the Bible. The number two reason is hypocrisy of the
Yeah.
religious.
I mean,
And then number
and
three is
yeah.
science. So yeah, they're fighting the wrong battle.
Well, it's got to be relevant to life, and that's the
Yeah,
thing is, you know, you, you have to keep your tie to the past, but you have to update it and make it relevant to life. We don't live in the time of the apostles. And if we try to practice it the same, we're not going to get it right. We can't take what they say because we miss out so much of that context. We have to update it for our context. There's, and I believe there's timeless truths and there's contingent truths. Well, you got to be able to decipher the two. And part of the tradition helps you in that is realizing, okay, is recognizing there's contingent truths there. There's things that are true because of the time period that was in. Because my time period is different, so I have to take the timeless truths and try to fit that into my current context and learn those contingent truths.
um, it is a necessary thing. And I mean, they'll learn it or they won't. They'll catch on or they won't. They'll adapt or they won't. Um, as far as structuring, moving forward, how would you like to play this?
Same deal. I think you should probably just have maybe either one or two primary themes we try to hit on and try to address
No,
on
no,
through those. Oh,
I mean like timing.
just once a week would be good for me. I think just pick a time to
Okay,
kind of hit do like a once a week type format. I think it's a pretty good one to go with.
that works for me.
Yeah,
I am going to, let's see,
yeah,
this next Saturday, I'm going to an
yeah,
authors
yeah.
meet that's being hosted by a local bookstore. But you know, I do
Like I
not
said,
want.
as far as like time goes, I'm very flexible. Like I
Okay,
can, yeah. So really,
I
pretty
mean we
much
could
we do it once a week, and pretty much any day you do is probably gonna work for me just fine.
just give you a few days' notice.
Yeah, just give me a few days notice and we're good to go.
All right, that works
All
for
right.
me. We might could shift it to a Saturday. Shoot, Friday.
Yeah, Friday works.
Okay. Well, Mike, I gotta
Pleasure.
let you go.
Absolutely. Me
But
too. All right.
hey, it
Take
was
care.
super meeting you. As
Absolutely.
again, as again, this was like 10 times more fun than I expected. I
Yeah,
loved it.
works out great. All right.
Yeah.
Take care, brother.
You too. Bye,
Bye.
Mike.